Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Mélade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément. Monsieur le connétable de Grouville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Southern.
Présent.
Madame le député Labby. Monsieur le député Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Luce.
Présent.
Madame le député Dublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Morel.
Présent.
Madame le député de Hegera.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Ward.
Présent.
Madame le député Alves.
Présente.
Madame le député Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Gorst.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le député Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Joseph. Monsieur le député Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le député Coles.
Présent.
Madame le député Poré. Monsieur le député War.
Présent.
Madame le député Miles.
Présente.
Madame le député Scott. Monsieur le député Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le député Curtis. Madame le député Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le député Binet.
Présente.
Madame le député Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le député Miller.
Présente.
Madame le député Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Binet. Monsieur le député Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le député Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Curtis.
Présent.
Madame le député Ward.
Présente.
Madame le député Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le député Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le député Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait le ciel et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération étant accompagnée de ta bénédiction, réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plût de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions, au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Sir, the Connétable is at a hospital appointment this morning, and he's asked if he could be excused, but will actually be in later.
Members content to mark the Connétable excusé? Excusé.
Madame le député Labby.
So Deputy Labby is accompanying a family member to a medical appointment and she'll be in as soon as she can, so please could she be marked excusé?
Members content to mark the deputy excusé? Excusé.
Monsieur le député Joseph.
Sir, Deputy Osif is malade this morning.
Vous jurez que Monsieur le député Joseph est tellement indisposé qu'il ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé.
Madame.
Madame le député Poré.
So could Deputy Porrier please be marked excusé for the same reasons as yesterday?
Yes, members content to mark Deputy Porrier excusé? Excusé. Les États sont constitués.
Sir, if I may. So it's just to say, sir, I'm going to have to take leave of the Assembly if they're okay. I have an important family appointment. My daughter's leaving ceremony for school is taking place in about 40 minutes. So if I may.
Thanks very much for letting us know. I'd like to welcome to the gallery this morning Sarah Champion and her assistant. Sarah Champion is the Member of Parliament for Rotherham and is chair of the Channel Islands All-Party Parliamentary Group. And as members may know, the purpose of that group is to promote a better understanding of the constitutional position of the Channel Islands and the issues facing our islands, and to foster a better relationship with the UK. So I'd like the members to give her a warm welcome in the usual way. Thank you. We now return to the debate, the second reading of the Draft Elections Jersey Amendment Law, Articles 5 to 17. Connétable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. Having considered Deputy Scott's request for a reference back and comments made by Deputy Balash in the debate yesterday, and having sought advice, PPC would like to withdraw Article 5. This will enable PPC and the JEA to consider this article more fully. Withdrawing Article 5 will not affect the Assembly being able to vote for the rest of the articles. And before I close, I will be voting for the withdrawal of Article 5, but I would like to ask the advice of the SG as to the consequences of keeping what the consequences of keeping Article 5 would be. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Solicitor General.
Well, the first point is that if it weren't rejected, it would not have any knock-on effect on the other articles in the amendment law. If it is adopted, then I would repeat the 2 points that I think Deputy Balash made in yesterday's debate, which I thought had real force to them. The first point he made was that in amending Article 13D1 of the Elections Law to create a right for the public to complain, Article 5 as presently drafted does not amend Article 13D3 to empower the Assembly to make regulations to govern the manner in which the JEA might handle complaints by the public. So one would have the strange contradiction in the law in which complaints by candidates would be governed by regulations made by the Assembly, whereas complaints by the public would not be. In the context of the advice I gave yesterday, which was that it is foreseeable that the way in which the JEA handles a complaint by a member of the public might result in judicial review proceedings in the Royal Court. That, in my view, is a legal lacuna of some potential significance. The second point Deputy Balash made is rather more fundamental. I think he said something to the effect of, if you give people the right to complain, you must expect that people will do so. And he described it colourfully as are we opening a Pandora's box? So Article 5 is widely drawn in terms of who the public can complain about. We read at 5b that the public can, if it's enacted, complain against the conduct of a person carrying out functions in connection with a public election under this or any other law. So we rely to a significant extent on volunteers to staff and run our polling stations on election day, whether that is a jurat volunteering to be an autorise, whether it's a member of the public volunteering to sit at a table and dispense ballot papers and tick people's names off on the list, whether it's volunteers who count the votes at the end of the process, or anyone else involved, would be, as it were, in the frame to be complained about by members of the public. And it may be that members would want to reflect in this debate on the extent to which that might have a chilling effect on volunteers wishing in future to assist in running our polling stations on election day. My own experience as an autorise in the last general election is that the system relies, as I say, very substantially on volunteers in carrying out simply a civic duty. So those are the points that Deputy Balash made yesterday. I echo them. In my view, they have considerable substance to them, and that's, I hope, helpful.
Thank you. So the application, the proposal made by the chair is that she should have leave of the Assembly to withdraw Article 5. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the Connétable's proposition to seek leave of the Assembly to withdraw Article 5? Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I very much thank the Privileges and Procedures Committee for considering the email that I sent to States members last night, in which I discussed the content of a possible proposition to refer back. And also thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to draft the content of that email. I do think it's a piece, but we often perhaps leap before we look, and sometimes we just need to do work, and many hands make light work. Could this situation have been avoided if there had been more engagement with the corporate scrutiny panel? I don't know, but I do think that as we progress during this debate, understanding the value of having early scrutiny is something I would point out to all States members. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
So we finished yesterday quite unsatisfactorily, and we've started this morning very unsatisfactorily. We seem to have the worst. We seem to have the worst of both worlds here. A reference back is basically would have asked for an article or many articles which the mover thought she had a problem with, to go back and look for clarification about inaccuracies or ambiguities, rather, in the law. That's what a reference back is for. And I noticed my reading of the email that was circulated by the member last night didn't have any inaccuracies that it wanted to be clarified. It simply had, I think, political differences, if I can put it that way, and concerns. And it's not for PPC to do a reference back and then come back with concerns. And I think that's why ultimately the reference back wouldn't have succeeded. And in withdrawing Article 5, what the chair of PPC is doing is withdrawing our right as an elected assembly to make a consideration of Article 5 and its merits and have a proper debate on that. So she, I think, unfortunately, is capitulating to a spurious reference back, the threat of a spurious reference back, which I suspect wouldn't have passed, and at the same time has made the knee-jerk reaction to deprive us of our say on Article 5. I think that Article 5, as we've heard from the Solicitor General, its removal is highly problematic, and it seems that it would put us in a very strange position. If that's not what he said, then
Exactly.
I'm happy to...
Sorry, yes, just a point of clarification, please. Just perhaps Deputy Tadier would clarify that's not what the Solicitor General said.
I think that's what he thinks he said.
No, that's fine.
Let's carry on, Deputy.
So I think that, okay, that's not what the Solicitor General said. I think, nonetheless, with the contribution of the Solicitor General, perhaps to the opposite side of the argument, is that I think we should still be considering Article 5 and actually just rejecting it, or considering its merits and telling PPC what we think it should be, how it should be amended. I think there is a good case for the JEA clearly to be accepting and considering complaints, and that not only complaints from candidates who may have an axe to grind with another candidate about something they said, something which likely is difficult to prove, but actually something potentially much more egregious that has happened to a member of the public against the candidate, or indeed the other way around. It could be a candidate who's received some kind of malicious threat or behaviour that's unacceptable from a member of the public, and it seems that all of those things need to be capably conceived of by the electoral authority. I don't know if this is the place to say it, but I will simply say also that in considering the wider objective of what the Jersey Electoral Authority is there to do, I think it should be given more powers, in fact. It should be empowered to actually not just look at how the technical nature of the voting process works, but actually the fairness of our voting system. I think it's probably correct to say at this point, whilst we've got a welcome visitor from the UK with responsibility for the Channel Islands, to say that this Assembly, by a narrow margin, has voted to make our electoral system even more of a postcode lottery than it is already. We know that in Jersey we have a postcode lottery whereby if you live in the urban areas you're already disenfranchised. Your power of vote, rather, I should say, is much less than it should be than the wealthy who live in the country, same as it ever was, to quote David Byrne. And talking heads, and it's only just got worse for political reasons and for gerrymandering purposes. So whether it's at the Ministry of Justice level or whether it's done at the Privy Council level, because we know, of course, since 1771...
We are debating whether or not to
I know, sir.
give the...
But I'm minded to channel the mastermind and say I've started, so I'll finish.
It's important to focus on the issue in hand.
Getting back to Article 5, sir, and perhaps why we should maintain it, is that I think we should be empowering the Jersey Electoral Authority to give them proper powers to look at the fairness of our system so that the UK don't need to intervene in the same way that they did in 1771, because we need to show that we're a proper self-governing democracy, that we don't need the UK government to intervene. But if we continue to make our electoral processes less fair, whether it's through the removal of Article 5, the redress, or in fact through the gerrymandering of our system, that we may actually need the UK to step in and do something for us to help.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable St-Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure that I'm pleased to follow Deputy Tadje, because actually I think I lost the gist of what he was trying to say. Has the chairman of PPC capitulated, or has she made a considered decision and come to the Assembly, as is her right, to ask for permission to withdraw this article? We will decide when we vote upon it. My concerns, sir, I was thinking about this last night, and of course the Solicitor General just mentioned the volunteers who help with elections, and that has been my concern since reading this proposed new article. We rely so heavily on volunteers to help to run the elections that my feeling is that if they were aware that the JEA could investigate complaints against them, I think it would be difficult to encourage people to come forward to undertake this important voluntary role. At the moment, sir, if there are any complaints on the day of an election, they are dealt with by the jurat as autorise. The ultimate decision rests with the jurat. And I, sir, who have been involved with elections for many years, don't recall any situations where maybe there have been minor quibbles where they have not been resolved satisfactorily to all parties. So my concern is volunteers, but also, sir, parish staff. They are employees. If there are complaints made against them, then the parish deals with those complaints under the contract of employment. We have disciplinary procedures that we follow, sir. My concern is that if authority is handed to the JEA to deal with complaints against members of staff, I don't know how that could be managed, and it's something that I urge PPC to consider if this article is withdrawn and further consideration is given to implementing a formal complaints procedure. My view, sir, is that we don't have a formal complaints procedure but things work. And if it ain't broke, why should we be looking to change it? Thank you, sir.
So, could I ask a question of the Solicitor General, please?
Yes, you may, yes.
Thank you, sir. In the current system that was just suggested, sir, if somebody makes a complaint to a jurat who is the ultimate end of that complaint, what happens if the person does not agree with the outcome or sees a wider issue? Do they have any outcome from, for example, our election laws, which are, I believe we have election law, and what would that mean in terms of the complaints process? Or have we simply got the end of a complaints process due to for an individual who can be both judge and jury on that complaint?
Solicitor General.
Well, I think there is only a limited redress to the Royal Court in respect of disputed elections and procedure and examination papers. It's dealt with in Part 10 of the election law. If I could just have a moment. Yes, I think it's limited to every case of a disputed public election or parish election shall be dealt with by the Royal Court. I don't think there's any higher redress if there is simply a complaint on the day to the autorise about, for example, the layout of voting booths, whether someone has had sufficient time to cast their vote, or whether someone should or shouldn't have received a home vote. I don't see there's any higher redress.
Thank you, sir. May I just add to the question? So in our current situation, are individuals, is there no way at all to make a complaint about an individual's conduct, or is there a way of making a complaint about an individual's conduct that could theoretically go to the Royal Court to be followed up if the outcome wasn't satisfactory on the day?
Well, at the moment, it is only a candidate who can complain under the existing law about either the conduct of another candidate at the election or the conduct of any person carrying out functions in connection with the election under this or any other law. That is a dispute, forgive me, that is a complaint that would be dealt with under the existing law by the JEA. The law makes no provision for an appeal against a decision by the JEA in respect of such a complaint, which is why I gave the advice I gave yesterday, that if there were to be a legal challenge, it would in all likelihood lie by way of an application for leave to seek judicial review.
Deputy Jones, is that a question for the Solicitor General?
Yes.
Yes, Deputy Jones.
Thank you, sir. By adding on to that question by Deputy Ward, also, of course, volunteers should be allowed to complain. And so is there any provision within the law, and do we feel that the going to the Royal Court is justification for maybe saying, complaining about unsafe working conditions like long hours or access to toilets or harassment and bullying or lack of support? I mean, these are maybe low-level complaints, and I'm wondering if going to the Royal Court is the right place to do it, and can they do that at this moment?
Solicitor General.
No, the only volunteers are not able, as a matter of law, to make a complaint that the JEA can consider under what is presently 13D of the Elections Jersey law. It is candidates who can complain about one another, or can complain about the conduct of any person carrying out functions in connection with the elections under this or any other law. The reference to the Royal Court is only where the JEA makes a decision and a person who is dissatisfied with that decision, it may be able to challenge it on the usual judicial review grounds that the decision made by the JEA was unlawful, was irrational, or was procedurally irregular. But the sort of minor complaints that the Deputy speaks of are just that. They are minor complaints which are not susceptible to legal challenge or resolution through the law.
So, sorry, may I ask another question?
Yes.
I did have a follow-up, but thanks to Deputy Chairman for giving me a moment to think about that. I suppose my question is, it's a what-if question. If a member of the public or a volunteer sees something happen in the election process which they see as significant, where do they go to make a complaint? And what redress do they have if they make that complaint in the current situation? Thank you, sir.
Well, I think I've already answered that question. The complaint is made to the autorise, who deals with it on the day. There is no further redress to the Royal Court other than that which I've mentioned under Part 10. I'm not sure I can help the Deputy any further.
Sorry, sir. What I'm trying to get to is if that outcome on the day over a significant process in our election process is seen by the autorise as I've dealt with that, but the person does not agree with that. Is there any redress after that that the person can take? Because it could be a significant impact on our election. We have to think about these things when we think about democracy, because it's such an important thing to get right.
Well, if the Deputy is referring to a complaint which is so significant that it gives rise to a dispute about the outcome of an election, then that is amenable to review by the Royal Court under Part 10 of the Elections Law. It is a case about a disputed public election or parish election. So if it really were the case that something had happened at a polling station which called into serious question the validity of the result, then the buck, as it were, would not stop with the autorise. It could be taken further to the Royal Court.
Sorry, sir. And one final point, would that include an individual that is volunteering to do that work? So if a complaint was made towards an individual?
The law says, Article 57, any person, whether or not a candidate in an election, may dispute a public election or parish election by making application to the Royal Court, being an application on oath setting out the grounds for the dispute and made before the end of the period of 12 months following the day that has been fixed for delivering the returns to the Royal Court. So any person.
So a question.
Yes.
So given the fact that in this instance the JEA would be removed from the equation and it would be the autorise making a judgment on any complaints, is the fact that the autorise is a jurat, so a jurat's elected by an electoral college of both the advocates and members of this assembly, could that be used as a motive for somebody who wasn't satisfied with the outcome of the judgment to then complain to the Royal Court that they feel that, because of course one of the potential candidates in that election could be somebody who's voted for the jurat to have that particular position, and then it gets referred to the Royal Court where jurats are also members of the Royal Court. So I'm afraid it does get very feudal. But is that likely to be a grounds for complaint, and is that in fact why legally the JEA was perhaps put in here to give some wiggle room to not compromise the role of perhaps jurats in this whole process?
Solicitor General, is that a question you can...
Well, I think that's, we're starting to stray into the realms of the speculative. Look, the proposition, Article 5 is not about removing the role of the Jersey Electoral Authority. It is about, in fact, extending its remit. By removing it, or if members vote against it, that does not remove the remit of the JEA as presently enacted. It simply means it won't be extended. So I'm not sure, for the purposes of this debate, that it would be helpful for me to venture a highly speculative answer to a highly speculative question.
The next person to speak was Deputy Rob Ward. Do you want to speak now or later, or not at all?
Yeah, let's give it a go, sir. Thank you. So I don't think this should be withdrawn. I think we should debate it and we should vote on it. And I think we should debate it and we vote on it because there is a choice to be made. And I'm afraid that I always have concerns whenever we hear the phrase, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You don't need to improve it. There's not been a problem, so let's not go near it. with election processes, you have to look at your processes and you have to look at them consistently. It happens around the world. There is international best practice. This Assembly has ignored it recently by making a change within the year of an election. That's a fact, factual information for us. We've decided to ignore best practice around the world. So just to say it ain't broke, I think is a very tenuous approach to what we're doing. This is just, we have a situation where we have a Jersey Election Authority, which I think should oversee all aspects of the election process. It should be independent of the judiciary. It should be very clearly set out as to its terms of reference. It should be clearly set out in terms of its processes and what it can and cannot do, the ways in which you can make complaints, and also which complaints will be ignored. Because there will be, we get it all the time, there were lots of complaints made about us that are ignored by the Commissioner because they're actually not proper complaints, they're just personal attacks sometimes. Now, you need that process in place. And this Article 5 is an enabling law to allow that to happen in the future. That's all it is. Article 5 says, yes, go away and work out and get the Jersey Election Authority its ability to deal with complaints in a constructive, independent, neutral way, away from candidates, away from the parish structures, because there are constable elections going on at the same time and there are other elections going on. And I think we need that credibility in our complaint system. And it takes it away from an individual. Individuals, therefore, are exposed to review and their decision-making. And there is nothing now that does not expose individuals who are volunteering in the election process if somebody makes a formal complaint and wants to take it further. But what we do have is an immediate move, it seems, to a much higher authority than the Jersey Election Authority, who could make a valued, independent judgment on these complaints. This is something that is needed, it is constructive, it is useful, and it is something we should not just be throwing out because of the pressure's been put on. And so I have to say, I'm afraid, that I'm incredibly disappointed in the use of standing orders yesterday, when a term of reference, and so if that is the process that we're going to have in terms of reference, fabulous. I look forward to using it myself. But to say that I will, a reference back, to say I have a reference back and then be given overnight so that we can receive emails with an argument for a reference back, that is not a process of a reference back I've ever seen before in this Assembly. I don't know if anyone else, and there are some very experienced members of this Assembly who have ever seen the process used in that way. And that has clouded this judgment that we're making here, which will be a poor judgment just to remove it, and we will forego our right, our ability and our duty to make decisions on this because of, I think, a very misplaced use of a reference back.
Sir, can I ask a point of clarification?
Well, only if you're prepared to give way.
No,
Yeah.
sir, I'm going to finish my speech. I'll do it at the end. I'm happy to, but let me finish because I get thrown. I've now been thrown. Sorry. So the reference back I thought was used, and so we've got ourselves in a situation in this Assembly that we get ourselves into so many times. We aren't going down rabbit holes. We've gone through an entire warren of rabbit holes here. And we'll end up there again and again and again and again. Because we take something that is simple, is clear, and actually gives us a way forward and say, oh no, we can't do that, for some dubious reasons, which are raised constantly about it. Now, if you don't like the way the election authority is working when it comes back, bring changes to the election authority to this Assembly. But at the moment, we will have nothing there in terms of complaints, unless, apart from something where we've said, oh, well, there aren't very many, there's no complaints, and they're dealt with very easily. So something that shouldn't be a problem has suddenly become a problem. And I'm afraid, I think it is fundamentally wrong to make judgments, particularly legal advice, on the notion of a Pandora's box, something that is created. A straw person to be stood there to go and argued with. It doesn't exist. And just because it's going to happen doesn't mean it's there. So I think we have got ourselves in a really poor position here, and I think the best thing that we can do is debate this, vote on it. If it is rejected, at least we go out to the electorate and say, we made this decision on Article 5. We don't want you to have your complaints to go to Jersey Election Authority. We're happy to have an individual judge on them, even though you don't know, and then that's the end of it. That's as far as your complaints can go. If you don't like it, move on. So I urge people to reject the removal of Article 5 today. Let's debate it and let's go through it properly, because this is not the correct way, I believe, to proceed with this process.
Deputy Scott, your point of clarification?
Yes, please, sir. I just wanted the Deputy to clarify his understanding in terms of the history of the, or the novelty of the reference back, because earlier in this state sitting, we debated P.27 2025 regarding the draft elections electoral registers law. That was referred back to the PPC in the context of the proposal that was in it regarding the removal of, regarding the actual availability of registers and of people on it. And then the PPC considered it and brought an amendment.
I think the point of clarification needs to be limited to seeking clarification of what the members said.
I just want to clarify if really this reference back I was considering was that different.
Yes, sir. I do believe it's fundamentally different, because the previous reference back was dealt with on the same day at the time, because the person referring back had a very clear idea in their head before they put their button on to say, I'd like to reference back, as to what that reference back was. Whereas the reference back yesterday seemed to stop and be given overnight to decide on what the reference back would be. That's why I think it was a fundamentally different application of our standing order, and I'm very disappointed in it, sir.
Another point of clarification. Does the Deputy not recall I said I was willing to give the details at the time?
Well,
sir, can I just say, I do remember that, but it didn't happen. And it's about reality in this Assembly.
Right, thank you. Deputy Breniff.
Thank you, sir. I too am going to speak against the withdrawal of this, because I think that the reasons advanced for withdrawing this cannot be remedied by a reference back. The reasons advanced are so fundamental that they are not amenable to a little compromise. They are about a fundamental... I'm not going to accept points of intervention.
Okay, but it's not a reference back.
So we are debating whether this is withdrawn, and if it is withdrawn, then the consequence of it will be that it will go back to PPC to bring forward further proposals in the future. It may not be a reference back, it has the same effect. It will be for the PPC to bring those proposals forward. I'm not going to take further points of intervention. Those points are fundamental. They are about whether or not the JEA is involved in this process. The logical response, it seems to me, for people who do not want that is to vote against it, which we can do today. We can move to that today. And I do think that members need to think very carefully about what they are actually considering here. Because, as the Solicitor General has made clear, there is already a process in place to involve the JEA in complaints. That is accessible to candidates, and candidates only. What we are saying, if we do not pass Article 5, is that what's good enough for us as candidates, we are going to deny to members of the public. And when members of the public come to us and say, we wanted to complain, we will be saying, well, tough, because we voted not to let you complain using that process, which is good enough for us. Good enough for us. We're happy with it. We've been using it already. It's already been in place. But we're not going to extend it to you members of the public. You can use an old-fashioned process that's already been in existence and so on. I do not think that this Assembly should be going down that route. I think we should be voting now very clearly in the knowledge of the issues. This proposition was first lodged at the beginning of April. Members have had 2.5 months, more than 2.5 months, to examine all the implications of it. Some members have. The Committee to Connétable has brought amendments to it, detailed amendments. Deputy Jeune brought an amendment to it. The Assembly referred it back once to corporate services. Corporate services have looked at it. Members have had ample opportunity to ask questions. The Assembly raised a great big flag saying, look more closely at this proposition when it referenced it back. If members wished to raise issues around Article 5, they have had huge amounts of time available to do so. Our job is to come to this Assembly prepared. And we should, if members had problems with that, then they should have raised them. They could have spoken to the chair of PPC. They could have sought clarification elsewhere. They could have brought amendments to this. So I think we have had ample time to discuss this. We've had ample time to look at it. We are in danger of denying to the members of the public. So in my view, we should accept Article 5, but members may disagree, that's fine. In my view, we should move to the vote to discuss, to vote on Article 5, make the decision now, because the issues are simple. They're not going to be resolved by reference, by further consideration by PPC, because you cannot resolve the fundamental issue by further sort of tinkering. It is a basic point which everybody can see and vote on now. There's nothing further, there's no further clarification of that necessary. So I think we should move ahead. We should accept that that the issues are clear, that the issues that were raised by Deputy Balash and amplified by the Solicitor General were basically political objections to a process, to a change in the process that may or may not have validity, and members are entirely entitled to their own opinions on those. But we should vote on them now and not waste any further time on this. If this goes back, we will still be debating it in September or October, and that is just ridiculous.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. Well, I perhaps am going against the tide, sir, and I support the chair of PPC's wish to seek leave of the Assembly to withdraw Article 5. Members will recall yesterday in moving the article, one of the things that the chair said was that people would be able to complain about what was said at hustings as part of this potential process. And the reason I raise that, sir, is because one of my colleagues this morning has made a most outrageous contribution to this Assembly, talking about constitutional nonsense. The reality is that at a hustings, candidates can articulate their platform. We may not agree with it. I fundamentally disagree that a member of this Assembly would stand up and say that a legitimate in-principle decision of this Assembly, approved by the majority, should be submitted to either the Ministry of Justice or the Privy Council to have it overturned. That, to my mind, is a fundamental misunderstanding of our constitutional position, and I, for one, sir, won't stand for it, particularly when, of course, we're going to argue about the role of senator. Of course we are, and to some extent, of course, the deputy was playing to the crowd, which is no longer there. But the senatorial office can only be described as the most democratic office, and so it's a constitutional nonsense to suggest that it shows that we can't govern ourselves. And that the UK should intervene in something that's been democratically decided by this Assembly of democratically elected members. Now, the deputy that made that assertion and his party, that could be their legitimate position in their manifesto. They could espouse such matters from a hustings. Should people be able to complain about that to the JEA? Or is that legitimate political dialogue? So I absolutely accept that there needs to be an improved process for dealing with complaints. We currently have a limited complaint process where candidates complain about other candidates. But as other contributors said yesterday, particularly Deputy Balash, it would not be like for like. In regard to complaints between candidates, there are regulations moved in this Assembly. That's how it should be dealt with. What's being currently proposed here would mean that it was a different process for other complaints. And that to me seems to be at best confusing and inherently unfair. So I do think it's right that PPC are allowed to withdraw Article 5 to consider what complaints process might be required. It might be that they arrive at the very eminent common sense approach which has made this island what it is, that if it ain't broke, don't bother fixing it. But we seem to have moved into a world of, even if it's not broke, we'll bring in some legislation and try to do something differently, and we've got to guard against that, sir. We could very easily, by accepting this, I think, bring the whole electoral process into disrepute. So PPC have said they'd like to give it more thought. They will do some more work on it and bring it back, and I think they should be supported in that process to take it back and to give it further consideration because of all of the issues which other members have referred to, not least of which the Solicitor General. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this proposition? Connétable Karen.
Just, if I can just draw members' attention, sir, to the comment from the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, page 7, and I think article or paragraph 36, which is very helpful and basically suggests that the panel is concerned about the process and urges the PPC to look into it, which is actually what the chairman is proposing. So, and before sitting down, I would reinforce the point that we must look after our adjoints, the helpers in the elections. They are exceedingly important, but I will be supporting the PPC proposal, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable. If no other members shall speak, I call upon the chair of PPC to reply. Chair.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank everyone for speaking, and I would just like to add that I do believe that the reference back should have been debated during the sitting yesterday. Then we wouldn't be where we are today. But and it wasn't a case, I was told that I was a knee-jerk reaction. It's absolutely not a knee-jerk reaction or a capitulation, but it's more of a pragmatic response. The issues raised by Deputy Balash are valid, and there would need to be an amendment to the legislation to remedy them. The JEA has only just been re-established, and it's only right that the chair and members of that body have an opportunity to have a part in the discussions which will ultimately dictate the parameters of their work. I am very for a level playing field, that the public and those of us elected, or standing for election, should all have the same rights to being put to the complaints. But at the moment, the way Article 5 stands, that's not the case, and so I would ask members to allow PPC to withdraw this. Thank you, sir.
Is the appel called for? The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats.
So just confirm that what the vote is for.
Yes, it's whether or not BBC have leave of the Assembly to withdraw Article 5 of the draft law. I invite the greffier to open the voting. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the proposition has been adopted. 30 votes pour, 14 votes contre. Yes.
Those members voting contre: Deputies Southern, Tadier, Rob Ward, Alves, Mesick, Coles, War, Miles, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Beltham, Jearn, Kovac and Andrews.
So now resume the debate on Articles now 6 to 17 inclusive in second reading. Does any other member wish to speak on those articles? Yes. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I think I did put my light on yesterday.
Yes, you did.
But I'm glad to have had a little bit of a break and to have some clarity about where we're going. So there's no reference back, and that's helpful. So no Article 5. That's also helpful. So I want to start this, my observations about talking about inclusion in the electoral process and how we perhaps cater or don't cater for inclusion. I was at a BIMR, so a British Islands Mediterranean Regions Conference recently with the Constable of St Bullard and Deputy Doublé, and there was a lot of ground covered, but one of the key themes for me was around disability. And something that struck me was the fact that when we, the correct name, I think, is one of the labels, if you like, that we use, is to talk about disabled people. And the speaker said that actually it is correct to call them disabled, but they're not disabled by their afflictions or rather their impairments. They're disabled by society and what society doesn't allow them to do. And so I would like to apply that kind of critical thinking to our electoral processes. And one of the questions I would have for the chair of PPC when it comes to the ballot papers that we talk about in these articles and how they're issued is that how do we ensure the secrecy and privacy of the ballot box for those who are for blind people? So, for example, it may well be that you say, well, of course, a blind person would be expected to get a postal vote to be able to vote at home. But then again, the question arises, how do we ensure the secrecy of the ballot for those individuals? I think the secrecy of the ballot is something that many of us take for granted, and I think many in our community would even say it's sacrosanct. The ability to be able to vote without anybody else knowing how you voted is something, as I say, that we all take for granted. So I would, first of all, question PPC, and perhaps she can the chair can come up with the answer in the summing up, or at least agree to give it consideration. If, as a blind person, you were to sign up to any polling station, would you be given a ballot paper with Braille on it if you were able to read Braille? And if not, why not? I mean, these are the kind of questions that we should be thinking about. We're at least 10 years on now from our discrimination law, yet if we're not leading by example in this, then we have to think about those things. Are all polling stations accessible? Are they? And does the person who wants to vote with a disability have to go out of their way to make the point that they need some kind of assistance? So I think these are things that we need to think about. How are complaints made by those disabled people? Now, if they want to make a complaint about the electoral process, is that still going to be covered? The second point is perhaps slightly more rarefied, but I think something that needs to be given consideration, is that when a new candidate is elected, if they are neither of a Christian faith nor are they an atheist or a humanist, what option do they have when they take the oath of office, sir? In the UK, in the House of Commons, the process is that the clerk will ask whether you want to swear an oath or to affirm, which is, of course, what we want to do. And then, if you do want to swear, you'll be asked which holy book you wish to swear on. So I don't know what would happen in Jersey if a Muslim or a Sikh or a Hindu, or the list could go on, even anyone else was elected. Would we simply say to that person, it's the Bible or nothing else? You have to take an affirmation. it seems to me that those kind of considerations, which are also, sir, considerations for the Royal Court, of course, because you have your own people that you swear in for different reasons. In the 21st century, in 2025, when we've just celebrated Pride this week, is it only the Bible, or is it only basically a non-religious affirmation? And whilst we're on that point, could I ask for consideration to be given into why it may be, whether it arises from these articles, about the swearing-in process? Why do elected states members who are elected to this Assembly, to this Parliament, have to swear an oath of office in the Royal Court, which has absolutely nothing to do with this Assembly? It would make just as much sense for jurats to have to take their oath of office in this Assembly as it would for newly elected states members to take an oath in the Royal Court, sir. And it doesn't say much for the separation of powers in Jersey. So I'll make those points about perhaps modernisation and inclusion, whether or not they go down well and fall on, I was going to say on deaf ears, but that wouldn't be entirely appropriate, sir, given the context of my speech earlier. So I'd like to turn my attention to the role of the Jersey Electoral Authority now, perhaps in coordinating elections. The choice I think that we were faced with is that it should be the Jersey Electoral Authority who organise hustings, did I say hustings earlier, rather than elections, and not the candidates. Now the reality is, certainly in some elections, although it is theoretically the candidates who would arrange the hustings for themselves, certainly in the senatorial elections, and if we have senatorial elections coming back, I think that's perhaps where the most consideration of organisation of hustings, how many hustings in particular, needs to be given real consideration, because the only time that I stood for senator was back in 2008. The nomination evening was Tuesday the 16th of September at the Town Hall. There were 21 candidates, and then when all the nominations had been made, it was said that the candidates had to choose where the hustings would be. But as if by magic, the chair of the Comité de Connétables, it was the Connétable Vibert at the time from St. One's, pulls out a little piece of paper from his pocket and says, but if it's helpful, these are all the dates from the parish halls when the parish halls are available. Would we like to adopt this? Would the candidates like to do this? And there was some discussion, but the majority basically went in favour of the prescribed list and the pre-booked dates for all of the parish halls. Now, I would hope that if we do have senators back, and it's by no means a given, there's still time for members to change their mind and see the light, that certainly there shouldn't be 12 hustings plus another 3, perhaps, one for the Chamber of Commerce, one for the RJHNA, and one wherever we might get pulled in, or they might get pulled in, I should say. That wasn't a Freudian slip. It should be maybe done in a more sensible way. So if it is for the Jersey Electoral Authority to decide when and how the hustings take place, I think first of all they should probably think about streamlining the process, think about how many people actually turn up to hustings, think about how big the island actually is. And if it's truly an island-wide vote, then you don't need to have each one in each parish. So it may well be that the Electoral Authority think we'll have one in the west, it's a very good school by the way, around Lekeneve, one in the east, and one in the centre somewhere. I think that's probably perfectly sufficient. And the senatorial candidates, there will probably be quite a few of them, can spend their time perhaps engaging in other novel ways. I'm sure they'll have their time stretched anyway in that process. Changes to the ballot paper. This is just a small remark, and I don't think it's one that's necessarily fundamental, but it's just an observation. I have some comment to make and perhaps some reservations on the changing of the name of a spoilt paper to a cancelled paper. And the reason for that is that I think it changes the emphasis and the way that we look at the purpose of what is still a spoilt paper. I think it's entirely possible, of course, that spoilt papers may end up in the ballot box because somebody has made a mistake on the ballot paper, but usually a spoilt paper could be considered a form of protest. It's where somebody goes down rather than casting a vote for the candidates that are available for whatever reason. They may wish to make a protest, and it's an opportunity to explore some of their best artwork or graffiti or poetry that they may wish to write on the ballot paper, therefore it is called a spoilt ballot paper. And I think that perhaps in changing the word to cancelled, it perhaps just makes it quite bland. I think perhaps a better word would have been void, because I think actually, let me get back to the point, a spoilt paper is an active effort that the voter has taken. A cancelled paper is what happens to a spoilt paper, so it gets cancelled.
Deputy, the word chosen in the draft law is annulled.
Annulled, thank you, sir. I just heard cancelled earlier, but annulled, thank you, sir. So annulled is the same as cancelled, so the same point applies. It's been annulled. I'd have probably preferred the word void, because you can void your paper and then a paper can become void because it's been spoilt. But I'm not going to necessarily ask for that to be taken separately. It's just an observation about how perhaps language matters and how the perception might change. Because I think protest is an important part of the democratic process as well. So I think that the reason the JEA is going to have such an important job in the next election is that there's likely to be many more complaints, not necessarily about conduct during hustings, but things like posters. We know that posters were creating a massive problem for candidates. It was really difficult to know where posters should go. Unlike in Europe, where there are designated areas to be able to put up posters, and they're often put up for you, and that there's a formula whereby a guaranteed exposure and a fairness is included. In Jersey, it's very much a free-for-all. We're going to see not just this time deputies' posters and constables' posters being put up, but senators' posters will be put up as well. And very soon, and there could be 20 senatorial candidates standing for 9 seats, maybe even more. There's going to be an awful lot of clutter, and I think serious consideration needs to be given to dealing with that in a democratic society, a society which is increasingly using digital forum. You know, the tourism industry in Jersey recently got rid of its visitor centre because it said that people didn't want to have drop-in and they weren't valuing paper leaflets anymore. Clearly they've had to go back on that, but there is some debate to be had about to what extent posters, not least because of the environmental impact that they have, should be featuring in an election in the 21st century. I personally would actually favour probably a ban on posters, but that's perhaps more extreme, and there is, of course, the counter-argument that it would hinder new candidates who perhaps need to get their faces out there and more well-known. But I'll leave those thoughts perhaps not necessarily for the chair of the PPC, but for the chair of the the JEA. And so with those comments, I'll sit down.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable St John.
Thank you, sir. So I generally welcome these changes, and in particular the review of polling stations. This is a subject that I've written about and we've spoken about many times in this Assembly. There are many improvement opportunities in this respect. For example, hopefully a polling station will be placed in the Lamourie area of St Clement, something I know the Constable of St Clement has also been keen to see. In answer to Deputy Tadier's question about accessibility at polling stations, I believe that all polling stations were audited before the last general election to ensure accessibility, and in some cases significant investment was made to ensure compliance. The proposal is for the JEA in consultation with the authorities to decide on location of polling stations. So I would ask my colleague, the chair of PPC, to confirm that the electoral administrators will also be included in these discussions. It is the electoral administrators, so in many cases possess a lot of experience around elections and importantly local knowledge. These people, sir, are also tasked with recruiting volunteers for polling day. So I'd also like to ask for clarification on the hustings. In terms of the hustings, in my experience, candidates can never win an election at a hustings, but again, sir, my experience tells me that candidates can lose an election at a hustings. Sir, 3 years after the last deputy's hustings in St John, people still laugh about the candidate who said the new hospital will be free. I tell you, free. And people still laugh about that today. I presume the pre-selected dates are for the filmed hustings and that there will be no constraint on candidates to hold additional meetings if candidates agree to them. Also, if interest groups want to invite candidates to speak on specific subjects at a hustings, as they have in the past, then they'll be free to do so. So it is all of our responsibilities to encourage participations in an election. Hustings should be encouraged as part of that engagement. In terms of postal votes, we have in this debate been reminded that many islanders participate in overseas elections. Often this is done through postal voting. There appears to be a nervousness in Jersey around postal voting. The public needs to be encouraged to do this early. The recent election in Guernsey allowed members of the public, if they had missed the postal deadline, to drop off their completed postal votes right up until the polls closed at 8 p.m. on election day at Frossard House. Currently, our postal votes are low, despite the changes made in 2021. Just 6% of electors in St John's who participated in 2022, compared to around 18% in the UK. In Guernsey, it was reported that around 9,000 islanders had opted for a postal vote. That's approximately a third of their electorate and around half of those who exercised their right, or should I say duty to vote. They did so by postal vote, sir. I'd also encourage PPC to look at how we can further promote postal voting as part of the engagement piece and perhaps give clear instructions to candidates as to what they can and can't do in relation to this. So I mentioned the Guernsey election, and in that recent election, some 12% of Guernsey voters took advantage of pre-polling, and again in St John it was just 4% in 2022, and I think this is an area that PPC can also promote around engagement. So whilst I've asked these questions, I'd like to thank the PPC for taking on board the feedback from the last time we debated the subject, and I'll be supporting their proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I just want to make a small point because I think it is worth remembering that the substantial thrust of these proposals that remain, and indeed the one that we've removed to send it to us for PPC to consider further, is to give more power to the Jersey Election Authority. And I want to make it very clear that I am completely in favour of that move, that this represents a significant professionalisation, if you like, of the process, and I think that we should be profoundly grateful for the work that the Jersey Election Authority did around the previous election. They made clear and sensible points about that about that election, which are reflected in some of these recommendations. And I think the views that have been expressed that express nervousness around, for example, the fact that we would be giving the JEA the right to set guidance and so on, do not cause me the concern that this seems to cause other people. I would expect guidance and the work that they do in collaboration with the electoral authorities in each parish, which is mandated in the question around where the ballot boxes are, polling stations are rather, and so on. These people who put themselves forward for these roles, in my experience, are exceptionally committed. They're very responsible. They care deeply about their roles, and they have a vested interest in ensuring that the recommendations that they make, the decisions that they come to, the guidance that they issue are sensible, because they are the ones who are going to live with the consequences if they are not. They are the ones who will have to deal with the complaints and so on, should we eventually get to that stage, which I hope we do. So I would simply draw attention to that fact. The consequence of this passing is that we do have a more significant role for the JEA. I think that is to be welcomed, notwithstanding the fact that, of course, they need to cooperate with the existing structures that are in place, and I welcome these changes.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member to speak on these articles in second reading? I call upon the Chair to reply.
Thank you, sir, and I thank everybody who's spoken. I've made notes, but so forgive me if they're not all in order. And I would just like to start by saying that I am really grateful to the JEA. We've got an absolutely excellent chair and members of that committee are very well qualified to carry out their roles, and they are very responsible and committed individuals. I'd like to assure my colleague that PPC is looking, no, not looking at it. We will be promoting postal voting and pre-poll voting. It's been the tenet of my chairmanship that we've got the AVR in, we've got Sunday voting in, and I really want to get people out voting, so we'll be doing everything we can to promote these things. As for postal voting, there is a date stated, but there is discretion. There will be discretion for the receiving of postal votes. And I also like to say that although the JEA will be responsible for arranging the hustings, and that was done to try and help members, not hinder members. Hustings are incredibly important. It was just that some of us were called, well, most of us, all of us, were pulled in all sorts of directions last one, and we couldn't be in 3-4 places at once. But there won't be a ban on having extra hustings. I'd like to assure people of that. I'd like to assure, I do not know, but I will look into what happens if somebody is blind and they are voting. As Deputy Constable Jehan said, parishes and the authorities, we do take disability access very, very seriously, and all the parishes were audited, had a disability audit before the last election. And in my own parish, we then set up a disability and inclusion fund. We had a special ramp built, which we've stored for the next year. We've got special voting booths, and we do take it, and we're all trying to enhance things even more. And bearing in mind that the elections will be on a Sunday next year, schools will probably be utilised where there is a lot of, where disability and inclusion is taken into consideration. The oath of office, I'm not certain, I'll look at the Deputy Bellies for this, but I do believe it already happens that you can affirm, if you're non-religious, you can take an affirmation oath in the...
So clarification, would the Chair give way?
Yes.
It's just to say that it's not a question of whether you can affirm or take an oath on the Bible. It's the fact that you can't take an oath on a different religious book. So if you're Muslim, you would have to affirm rather than swearing on the Bible. And I think consideration needs to be given to being able to vote on a different book. Not vote, swear, sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, yes, this is something that I think hadn't been brought up with PPC before, but it's something that that PPC can look at. What else have I got? I've done hustings, JEA. Oh yes, and electoral administrators will be included in discussions. It would be rather foolish to leave them out, because I agree they do have a lot of knowledge. And they do have an ongoing role. They have been discussing it. So I think I've answered everybody's questions. It's been a very good discussion, and thank you all very much. And I would...
Support of
sorry.
clarification?
Yeah.
Yes, do we give way for
yes, I do.
clarification? Yes, Deputy Gardner.
If just Chair can indicate if the new people will be appointed or any change in the membership.
We have we've already got a new committee constituted. So they've had their first meeting. It came to the States. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you look it up,
through the chair.
Sorry.
Through the chair. If the
through
member
the chair.
looks it up.
Sorry. If the deputy would like to look up the composition of the JEA, they are an excellent group of chair and members, and they've had one meeting already. So I hope that members will support these administrative changes to the elections law, and I call for the appel. Thank you.
Well, has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. We are considering the adoption of Articles 6 to 17 inclusive in second reading. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the Articles 6 to 17 have been adopted unanimously in second reading, 42 votes for. Chair, we now turn to the balance of the articles. Articles 18 to 30. Do you propose them en bloc?
Yes, sir. I propose a law in third reading, and I wish to place...
We're not in third reading.
Oh, sorry, no, we're not.
The
Sorry,
balance of the articles.
Sorry, to balance the articles, yes,
The
sorry,
balance
sir.
of the articles,
Yeah.
18 to 30 inclusive. Do you propose those articles?
Yes, please, sir. I propose one block.
Do you want to make any remarks in support of those articles?
I would do, but I've lost my... I would just be very grateful if everybody would support these articles. So.
Are articles 18 to 30 seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on articles 18 to 30 of the draft law? Deputy Rob Ward.
Sorry, so just, no, I'm not sorry, I should be speaking. Because I think recently with all these numbers, it's not going to stop me speaking. I'm a bit concerned over the postal vote. I don't think it should be 3 days before the poll that postal votes are accepted. I think any good practice should be on the closing of the poll on that day. I have seen a number of elections around the world and seen this happen. It's certainly possible in much larger jurisdictions like the US, who have accept postal votes on the day and they don't open until on the day. And the argument is that postal votes should not be counted until the day. Now, there is no reason, therefore, to have postal votes having to arrive 3 days beforehand unless they are going to be counted beforehand, which I don't think is good practice personally for an election. So therefore they need to be accepted right up until the end of the close of poll on polling day, in my view. So therefore, I'm afraid I would ask for Article 20 to be taken separately, which no later than the day, if possible, even if it's my own little protest vote. I do want to make a point that I'm very keen on observing elections around the world. My name is on a report that's about to go out on one of them, and I cannot stand here and say that I think it's the right thing to have 3 days before a poll, when I firmly don't believe that's the case. So I just that point. Thank you, sir.
So you seek a separate vote on Article 44, Deputy Rob
Yes.
Ward? Yes, which is your right.
2044.
Oh, sorry, Article 20. I'm doing it now. Article 20, which amends Article 44. Yes, Deputy Chair.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to stand to support Deputy Rob Ward's proposal, also because I think that this is concerning, especially. I think that I understand that it was probably put in because of the Sunday vote, but I believe there is post happening on received on a Saturday, and I'd be worried that this really does put restrictions on being able to receive the postal votes. So I also would be supportive of that.
Thank you. Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. And I too want to stand up and support the sentiments. I was a little bit surprised the chairman of PPC didn't reference the speech of the Constable St John, given that he spoke about the Guernsey postal vote situation. But I do understand, sir, that our election will be on a Sunday. It's going to make postal vote delivery a challenge. In fact, postal vote delivery on the Saturday might be a challenge. But we need to look at this to make sure that as many people who want to vote by post can do so and get their votes registered. but we need to accept at the same time that the change of a voting general election day to a Sunday is going to give us some challenges as to how this is done. We do seem to be going from noon on polling day to 3 days before. That's a big change, and I'd like PPC to go away and have a look to see whether they can improve on that. But I think we might need to accept that accepting postal votes on the election day, if it is a Sunday, could prove to be a problem. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. And I wanted to thank Deputy Ward, actually, for raising this. And I believe Deputy Tadjer mentioned in his speech about people with disabilities being able to access voting. And indeed, islanders who want to access postal voting, for some people it will be convenience, but for many islanders it will be those who have disabilities or who are caring for people. And I think actually we risk disenfranchising people, and it's putting additional barriers in. So I am also going to vote against Article 20, and I would actually urge the Assembly to do so, because having reflected on some of the previous speeches, I find myself feeling quite strongly about this, actually, that we should be able to accept those postal votes on the day. And I do wonder, I don't know if there is a minister in the Assembly who has responsibility for communicating with Jersey Post on this, because at other times of the year they do operate outside their normal days, and given the importance of a democratic election, there might be something that could be done there. So I don't know if there are any ministers present who can comment on that before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable St John.
So I don't have responsibility, sir, but I can speak with a little bit of knowledge. So it would be far too costly to operate a postal service on a Sunday just for an election, sir. But it would be possible for the public, if they've missed the postal vote through the postal service, to use Union Street as a receptacle for postal votes, just as I mentioned in my earlier speech that Frossard House is used in Guernsey. And you can actually go to the polling station with some identity and hand in your postal vote if you've missed the vote. So I would also urge members to reject this change. I think it's not a good way of encouraging people to vote. I think it's a way of putting people off. We should be making it easier, not harder, and I'd encourage colleagues to reject this item. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Tadjer.
Thanks, sir. Also on the subject of postal voting, I would like clarity, first of all, from the Solicitor General, if possible, and if not, from the Chair of PPC, as to what the consequence is of withdrawing Article 20. So if we did, or not withdrawing it, but not voting for it, would that leave some kind of lacuna, or would it simply mean that a new process would have to be in place? So whilst I share the general concerns about a deadline, because if we look at the wording of Article 20 as proposed, it's saying that no later than noon on the day of the poll there is substituted before the end of the third working day before the day of the poll. So that's for the, can I just clarify, that's for the arrival of the postal vote. So the postal vote must reach where it's got to get to before the end of the third working day before the day of the poll. So if my maths is correct, the third working day before the end of the poll, if we take Thursday and Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday as the working days, not Saturday and Sunday, it's got to arrive by the end of Wednesday. Is that correct? So that there's Thursday. So it seems like a lot of time is being put there. The logical thing would at least be to make it the Friday, the last working day before the poll. But I'd also make the point that Saturday and Sunday in terms of the election are working days, because there'll be people working on the elections, and Sunday there'll be staff around. So it does seem like a complete mess, this article. It doesn't make sense by any stretch of the imagination. I apologise if I misinterpreted that, but I presume I am correct in saying it's the arrival of the ballot paper, not the last date at which the ballot papers can be sent out. I do have concerns, though, about members of the public being able to drop a ballot paper in a postal ballot themselves, or giving it to somebody, delivering it to a government building, and that seems potentially wholly inappropriate. And the reason we trust Jersey Post is because they have set confidentiality and very professional standards that they have to adhere to. And I don't know if we were to how do we know if you give your postal ballot to somebody else, can you drop that in for me? That seems very problematic, that it might not be tampered with, and we know postal voting is one of the areas that needs to be very secure, and it's one of the areas which is often most suspicion is directed towards in terms of potential for voter fraud. So I think I'd need some serious clarification on what the process is for receiving those, but at the moment, like those who have already spoken, I can't support Article 20. I think that's actually a much bigger problem that would have merited a reference back than some of the others that we've heard about.
Deputy, do you want to ask the solicitor now about the consequence of the Assembly rejecting Article 20?
Please, thank you for the reminder.
Yes, Solicitor General.
Well, the procedure will remain as it is at present under the elections law for postal voting, which involves sending your postal vote in a pre-marked envelope provided by the judicial greffier to the judicial greffier's address by no later than noon. It must be received, forgive me, no later than noon on the day of the poll. So that would be the position that would remain.
Does any other member speak on these articles? Connétable Brillard.
So may I just explore a little bit further the comment from the Solicitor General by asking for the interpretation of postal. Does postal mean delivered by Jersey Post, or can it encompass a person putting it in a letterbox at a predetermined place? Thank you, sir.
I don't think that's defined, but to give the statute its purposive interpretation, if you delivered it as an elector by hand through the letterbox, that would fit the bill.
Yes. Does any other member speak in second reading on these articles? I call upon the Chair to reply.
Thank you, sir. And I'm happy to take Article 20 separately. I would just like to say that if you are really late with your postal vote and you are thinking you're handing it on the day of the election, you can actually take your postal vote with you to the polling station. But you would have to vote with your postal vote, if that makes sense, and not as a vote in case you're perceived to be voting twice. Yes, I'm happy to take Article 20 separately.
Yes, Chair. In terms of voting, would you like the Assembly to consider 18 and 19 first, and then Article 20, and then Articles 21 to 30?
Yes, please, sir.
Yes. So the first voting will be on Articles 18 and 19 only. Then we'll have a separate vote on the postal voting amendment, Article 20. So the first vote is on Articles 18 and 19 only. I invite members to return to their seats and the greffier to open the voting on Articles 18 and 19. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And Articles 18 and 19 have been adopted unanimously, 42 votes pour. Now move on to a separate vote on Article 20, which proposes an amendment in respect of postal voting. I invite the greffier to open the voting. It's Article 20, yes. If all members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that Article 20 has been rejected. 8 votes pour, 34 votes
Those members voting pour the Connétable, St Helier, St Lawrence, St Bernard, St Peter, St Martin, Grouville and St Juan, and Deputy Balash.
I move on to Articles 21 to 30. I ask the greffier to open the voting on Articles 21 to 30. Four members, the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the balance of the articles have been adopted unanimously. 43 votes for. Chair, do you wish to propose the draft law in third reading?
Yes, please, sir. And I'd like to thank all members again, and I propose the law on third reading. I wish to place on record PPC's gratitude to the 22 election observers, former Jersey Electoral Authority and parish administrators for the recommendations they made following the last elections, and hope that the amendments we have chosen to bring forward will enhance the existing electoral process. Thank you. I ask the members to adopt this law in third reading, and I call for the appel.
Thank you. Is the matter seconded in third reading? Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. A few points I want to make, which are very important about our electoral process. I mentioned before about opening up electoral polling stations. We need to encourage young people to vote. We are incredibly progressive on this island by having 16-year-olds being able to vote. We need to promote that, and we need to make sure that young people are encouraged to vote because it is their future they're voting for. One way to do this is to have pre-polls right in the centre of where those young people go every day, because we have a concentration of 16 and above-year-olds in one area of our island around Highlands and the top there, which is a 5-minute walk from every other institution where most people can vote of that age. And I think a pre-poll there would be an extremely good idea, and I will do everything I can as Education Minister to enable that. So whoever is arranging polling stations, please read this part of the Hansard. The next thing is to ensure access to polling stations. I think is in every single electoral report around the world. It's always reported on. I think it is something we need to take very, very seriously. There are lots of ways to mitigate sight impairment, hearing impairment, physical impairment, also issues around religious belief. In the UK, when I observed their elections, there were private areas for those who wore the veil to vote, for example, and that was about inclusivity and accessibility to the vote. So we need to be considering those things as well. Final couple of things, I'm trying to go as fast as I can because I know we've had this, but this is a really important point for us in terms of postal ballots. I just want to ensure that postal ballots are counted at the same time as other ballots. That is good practice. We should not be counting postal ballots before the ballot is finished. They can be influential in the outcome of the ballot, and that has been an issue for many jurisdictions around the world as to how those ballots are handled. And the final thing is, as well, we probably don't do that, and that's great, but I just want to reiterate that. But I want to make the point as well that whatever change we have to make, be that an extra delivery by Jersey Post on a Saturday or Sunday of envelopes that are clearly election envelopes because they are easily found, to how we staff polling stations. It's not about the convenience to do it, and I recognise the hard work that people have put into polling day to enable our democracy. They are very important people, but this is about the promotion of a democratic system that everyone has access to. We have a history of fighting for that democracy. Therefore, we have to keep it here. So it cannot be the convenience of anybody. The only convenience can be that we have a democratic right that can be shown very, very clearly. So I support all of these in third reading, just with those points to make. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member speak in third reading? Yes, Deputy Tadier, then Connétable St Lawrence. Yes.
So got to keep the word count up. I said to a colleague, I won't be long, I said to a colleague that we will look back on this in a few years' time when electronic voting is the norm and think how much of a waste of time a lot of what we've been debating here today is, because we're debating the intricacies and vagaries of a very cumbersome paper-based analogue system. So we may well look back on it, but members of the public are looking at us now thinking it's the 21st century, it's 2025. I can pick up my phone, I can go to my banking app, press a button, and it already knows from my face who I am, and I can transfer. I can't, but theoretically somebody could transfer tens of thousands or millions of pounds potentially with just an examination of, no, I'm saying hypothetically, I couldn't. But I'm sure there are members in the Assembly who could do that. So the system is perfectly secure. Let's not pretend about that. And at what point do we have a PPC, or at what point do we have an Assembly that says we will make it our goal to bring this democracy into the 20th century, but no, let's say the 21st century, let's be fair, and actually aspire to just allow people to vote at the press of a button, or at the press of a screen, because that's how simple it can be. The actual mechanisms of why people don't vote are, of course, complex, but technology should not be one of them. And we can't simply have the answer given that it's not secure enough. Jersey is an international finance centre, and we know that online banking, as I've said, other things are done perfectly securely. It's now time for this Assembly to take up the challenge, and the future Assembly to take up the challenge of electronic voting, which will render a lot of these amendments redundant in the future. That said, I do also acknowledge the work that's been done by this PPC, and it's not an easy job, and I know in the future, whichever PPC, whichever iteration is in place, we'll have some tough decisions to make. But if we always keep in mind the accessibility of the vote and improving our system, I think that PPC won't go far wrong.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to pick up on what the Education Minister said. It absolutely is incumbent upon us to encourage the younger generation to be aware of politics and to take part in decision-making by casting their vote. And I remember when Deputy Labby brought the proposition to allow voting at the age of 16, how proud I was actually that she'd done that, and how proud I felt to be able to vote for that at the time, to encourage our young people to be aware and to participate. Of course, the Education Minister will be aware that when the elections were held on a normal weekday, I think probably every parish hall had a visit from children from their local primary school. Certainly in St Lawrence, we welcomed members of St Lawrence Primary School. They rocked up from next door. Some of them that were there very early to see the ballot box being checked and sealed. And they were aware from the outset of what was happening. They actually watched the electors coming in, giving their names, being identified, receiving their papers, etc., and then going to vote. Of course, now with the election being on a Sunday, we won't have that happening because the schools will be closed. So I think it is incumbent upon us to encourage families to come to the polling station rather than just the electors themselves. And of course we do see parents coming with their children, with their younger children during the day on a normal weekday when we've voted on the Wednesdays. So I think if we can just encourage families to come now, let's make it a family event. We've tried to encourage people to turn out because it is on a Sunday. Hopefully the weather won't stop them from coming out on the 7th of June next year, but I think it's incumbent upon us all to encourage everyone to participate by bringing their children and particularly, I think, primary school children with them to vote next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable. Does any other member speak in third reading? I call upon the Chair to reply. Chair.
Thank you, sir, and thank you again to everybody who's spoken. I would like to, I'm sorry to disappoint Deputy Tadger, but it was one of my dearest wishes and ambitions to get electronic voting for 2026, and we have looked into it, but it's not secure enough. It has to be absolutely ironclad to and not be vulnerable to cyber attacks or malware or whatever. And we've really looked into it. It is very costly, but then the ease of access, if you could get a good system, would counteract the cost of it. I might be a bit of a Luddite myself, but for over 30 years, I've never mentioned my husband in this assembly before, but he's an absolute genius with computing. He really is highly thought of and highly skilled. So not only have I discussed it with the committee, but the thought of having electronic voting here it was one of my ambitions for this assembly. And I'm really sorry that we couldn't do it, but it is because it's just not secure. To Deputy Ward, the fact, and it has been mentioned before, that we hopefully will be using schools as polling stations. And so, as has been said before, young people are used to schools. They're not so used to parish halls or community centres or whatever. So hopefully they will, be more than happy to go and vote on a Sunday. And as the Constable of St Lawrence said, we're hoping that it might be a bit of a family day out and a bit of a, when you're on your way to the beach, if it's a really hot day, or on your way to wherever you're going, or on your way out of church, or whatever, on a Sunday we hope that people will come out and vote. I have made some other notes, but I can't actually read them, so I'd just like to ask members and thank members for their forbearance. It's been a very long sitting getting all these articles and the AVR through, so I'd like to thank all the members for their forbearance, and I would ask members to adopt this law in third reading, and I call for the appel. Thank you.
Appel has been called. 4 members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting in third reading. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the law has been adopted unanimously in third reading, 44 votes for. The next item is Draft Single-Use Plastics Regulations Law Amendment Regulations, the Restrictions Law Amendment Regulations, lodged by the Minister for Infrastructure. The main respondent is the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Single-Use Plastics, etc. Restrictions Law Jersey Amendment Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 15.1 of the Single-Use Plastics, etc. Restrictions Jersey Law 2021.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So the 2021 Single-Use Plastics Law is aimed at reducing the island's use of avoidable single-use plastics and supporting Jersey's carbon-neutral roadmap. In December 2024, single-use vapes were brought into the scope of the law. Royal assent has been received for this amendment, and I'll be looking to sign the commencement order shortly. The intention is that the single-use vapes ban will come into force around early August. As part of the work to expand the single-use plastics law to cover vapes, we took the opportunity to review the original law and make some minor changes to provide clarification and to facilitate its enforcement. As a reminder, under the single-use plastics law, customers can no longer receive single-use carrier bags made of plastic or paper when buying goods. Traders must charge at least 70 pence for a reusable bag made of recyclable paper or plastic, and this must be charged separately and include GST. The law provides a clear definition of what constitutes a reusable bag and details the exemptions from the law, including bags that are used to contain uncooked fish and fish products. The law has been operational for several years now, and I hope members will agree that it has resulted in a fundamental change in the island's use of plastic bags. From everyday observations of shoppers in town and at the supermarket, it is evident that thin, single-use plastic bags have been largely phased out of use. Some clarification to the law are required to help with enforcement, and these are covered in these regulations and a further order that I will be making in due course. These regulations amend paragraph 2 of the schedule to the single-use plastics law. This concerns exemptions from the requirement to charge 70p for a reusable bag under certain circumstances. The effect of this is that the minimum price that a trader must charge for a recyclable plastic or paper bag does not apply to bags that are supplied by wholesale from one trader to another or supplied second-hand under a trader's bag reuse scheme. The intent of the single-use plastics legislation was to reduce the use of single-use plastic in the island, restricting the use of single-use plastic and paper bags and requiring a minimum charge for reusable bags so that these are not overused. Applying the 70p per bag minimum charge for reusable bags for wholesale transactions between traders and for second-hand bags does not align with the intent of the law, and formal clarification that they are excluded has been requested by Trading Standards to facilitate enforcement of the law. This amendment therefore provides clarification that when a trader sells reusable plastic bags in a wholesale distributor capacity to another trader, the requirement to charge a minimum of 70p per bag does not apply. It also provides clarity that where, for example, a charity or organisation has donated used bags, it does not need to apply the 70p charge when providing them on to customers. I encourage the Assembly to support these regulations so that the appropriate exceptions from the charge for the reusable bags can be applied in order to facilitate enforcement. So I move the principles.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded? Does any motion speak on the principles of these regulations? Deputy Jeune.
Thank you, sir. And as Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, I rise to support the principles to the single-use plastic law, and the panel issued a short comments paper to reflect this. These changes are necessary. Clarifying rules for wholesalers and reuse schemes will help businesses comply without sacrificing Jersey's sustainability goals. It's right that following a review of current restrictions, we introduce clarification and flexibility. These changes will ensure the law is practical while still advancing our environmental goals. But let's not mistake tidying up the law for finishing the job. Plastic bags and single-use vapes were low-hanging fruit. Now we must target the next wave of needless waste, disposable cutlery, coffee cups and packaging, products used for minutes but polluting our environment for centuries. The evidence is clear. Plastic pollution damages marine life, lines our hedgerows along our roads, chokes landfills, creates harmful air pollution when burnt, and fuels the climate crisis. Solutions do exist. For example, bamboo cutlery or reusable cup schemes. Alternative materials for packaging are readily available. Many jurisdictions have banned single-use plastics and have seen a surge in eco-friendly alternatives, creating new opportunities for sustainable industries. It is always important that when implementing such schemes, that officials and the Minister sets out regular cooperative engagement with traders to ensure compliance is not onerous and enforcement is handled fairly to try to minimise resentment. That's where partnerships with EcoActive and charities promoting plastic-free Jersey come in, ensuring islanders, schools and mainly businesses and traders that understand the why behind these changes and not just the what. Some may argue that widening these restrictions could pose challenges for businesses, but I firmly believe that innovation and adaptation will follow, and I commend the many businesses that have already voluntarily introduced schemes to encourage their customers to move away from single-use plastics, going beyond these particular restrictions that are currently in place at the moment. So while the panel welcomes these modest amendments, I urge the Minister and future ministers to build on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the principles? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I do agree with what's happening here. I think there is some confusion still over what's charged for, and I sit here with a paper cup in front of me and a paper bag. I'm not sure whether this paper bag would be charged 70p. I don't think it would. And it's difficult to resist, so even if it has an invisible wall in it. Amazing how many people look for where the ball went then. But I think so. There is a inconsistency at times as to what we're paying for, what we're. And one of the ones is that you don't have the option with takeaways when they put it in a tiny little bag and deliver it to your door, not pay 70p for the bag. Also, I think one issue I would raise is that I don't know where the money goes to. And if the money was targeted towards a specific thing, I think it would be a lot easier and more palatable. I think that was the initial intention of the proposition, actually. There we go. But this is a step forward, but I do agree there are much more steps to be taken for us as a society. And I don't know about other people's households, but the argument over whether somebody just paid 70p for a plastic bag because they is one that rages in my house. I think it can be a real stress on relationships. So I think we do need to look into the future as well, and I'd agree with some of the comments that were already made. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Very, very quickly. And first of all, I'm grateful for Minister to bring in this amendment, because the amendment was needed to be brought some time ago. It has been raised almost immediately after we adopted the proposition that the reuse of already used bags needs to be free by charity shops and others, and it's really a welcome amendment. Interestingly enough, Deputy Ward mentioned what wasn't the proposition, and I did go back to my files and I found speech. Actually, the first speech when I made about this item in the Assembly when we debated it was 20th of June 2020, 5 years ago, and here we are. We know that the change was tangible. We do know that we have less single-use bags flying around Jersey, and they polluting our beaches as well. So it was tangible change. It just showed that the behavior change does require courage, and I remember how long we debated it. And I would like to encourage this minister, future minister, follow Deputy Jean and Deputy Ward. We have other single-use plastics, but most important, where the money are going, how with the profits from the selling the bags can actually support our climate emergency initiatives.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to briefly pick up on some of the wording in this that I hope the Minister can clarify. The panel did raise this, and I think we've got a good position on this. It's just to reassure traders around the words about what he referred to a traders reuse scheme. I think my understanding is this isn't a laborious scheme or something very hard to implement. It is as simple as a trader who wishes to receive bags from the public and then re-provide those to other members of the public who trade. The schedule that's being amended describes that exemption as a recyclable plastic carrier bag is as such unless A, it is supplied by wholesale to another trader, the first instance the Minister mentioned, and B, it is supplied at retail after it was earlier Roman 1 supplied at retail by a trader and Roman 2 returned to a trader. So whilst I know the Minister in his speech discussed a traders reuse scheme, it's just if he could clarify for those businesses thinking how quickly and easily, once this is enacted, they can ultimately then act on this. It is as simple as a company having a bin at the side of their property for used plastic bags who then people can pick from. And so if there's clarity of how easy this can be to use, I think would be useful traders and the public alike.
Thank you, Deputy War.
Thank you, sir. I just rise to respond to Deputy Gardner's commentary about the monetary side of these things. When we looked back, did an analysis in our business, and we've been sort of coffee shops notorious for all the disposable stuff that we handle. The cost the amount of money we receive from people who buy goods in our shop comes in at around about £3.50 in a month. So I just want to say, please don't bring any red tape about this. It's tiny in the grand scheme of things. The schemes are working. People's habits are changing. So please, let's keep off the backs of traders trying to work out where we spend our £3.50.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other members speak on the principles, I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank those who have contributed to the debate in particular the Environment Scrutiny Panel, sir, and Deputy Jean. Sir, we are well aware that more needs to be done, sir. This is not the end, sir. And my wife and I are part of the Adopt a Lane scheme in St John's, sir. And in the last few days, we've been out with litter pickers, and it's amazing how much plastic is there. I am pleased to report, sir, that we did find some bamboo spoons, although I wasn't happy to find them. It was better than finding plastic spoons. But so I'm acutely aware of that, that we've got to do more. And I would join the Deputy in commending those businesses who have adopted change. And I think to Deputy War's point, we are looking to work with traders, but sometimes we need to put legislation in place, but we'd much prefer to work with traders. And to Deputy War, we are working with those takeaway businesses that he mentioned and looking to see what options people have when they purchase goods, how they can be transported to them. In terms of Deputy Curtis's points, there are reuse schemes, so at some of the local supermarkets, and I believe that if you have a reuse scheme, you could start today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. The appell's been called for? The appell has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I invite the greffier to open the voting on the principles of the draft regulations. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce the principles have been adopted unanimously, 44 votes for. Minister, how do you wish to propose? Before we get to that stage, Deputy Jean, presumably you don't wish to scrutinise this matter because you've considered already.
No, sir.
Thank you very much. Minister, how do you wish to propose the regulations in second reading? There are only 3. Yes. Are the regulations seconded? Does anyone wish to speak on the regulations? All members in favour of adopting the regulations kindly show. The appell's been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members for the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously in second reading, 44 votes for. Minister, do you propose the regulations in third reading?
So I do, sir, and in doing so, I'd just like to once again thank the scrutiny panel for their constructive comments and also thank the officers who have worked on this project. Thank you, sir. Call for the appel.
Thank you, Minister. Are the regulations seconded in third reading? Yes, sir. Does anyone wish to speak on the regulations as adopted in second reading? The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats and the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting, and I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously in third reading, 44 votes for. The next item is the draft Process of Crime Amendment Regulations lodged by the Minister for External Relations. The main respondent is the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel. I'll ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Proceeds of Crime Jersey Amendment Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 47(1)(b) of the Sanctions and Asset Freezing Jersey Law 2019.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. This is a small amendment to Article 34 of the Proceeds of Crime Jersey Law 99. That law was amended some amendment was 22, but the effect of the amendment came into force in 23, the Draft Proceeds of Crime Financial Intelligence Amendment Jersey Regulations 2022, amended Article 34 that it was quite a complex amendment, and at the time there was an oversight around the ability to transfer information to the Minister for External Relations in the carrying out of his or her functions under Sanctions and Asset Freezing Jersey Law 2019. This corrects that oversight and reintroduces the gateway to provide that information, and I make the principles of this amendment, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Are the principles seconded? Does any member speak on the principles? Yes, Deputy Tadia.
So thank you. Just as the chair of the scrutiny panel, it's to say that we've looked at this, we've had a briefing, we understand this is largely a technical matter that needed remedying. It was an oversight and that has been corrected. And so we are quite happy, and members can rest assured that certainly from a panel's point of view, we have no concerns and we're happy to support it.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Balash.
So I too, of course, support this proposition, but I just wondered whether the Minister for External Relations has been inadvertently breaking the law in the last few years, and whether he needs to rely upon the indulgence of the Attorney General in that respect.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on the principles? I call upon the Minister to reply.
So I hope that I'm never inadvertently breaking the law, other than perhaps when my my right foot slips slightly on something called the accelerator. But I'd never obviously wish to do that. It's just inadvertent slip. The reality is, of course, with regard to this amendment, what it does is reinstate the gateway for the Financial Intelligence Unit to provide the information to the Minister. The Financial Intelligence Unit can, of its own accord, provide the information, and I'm reliably informed that it has not caused a hindrance to that. It is just the reinstatement of the explicit provision within the legislation to make it clear, so that no one could, at a future point, say that the Minister shouldn't have received, or the information shouldn't have been provided to the Minister. So it's reverting back to the position that ought to have been with an explicit provision, rather than just relying on a decision of the FIU. I hope, sir, that answers the Deputy's question. And I am, of course, grateful as ever to my panel for the work that they undertake in these particular areas and improve the legislation and provisions that we bring forward. And I call, sir, for the appel in the principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have got the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And the principles have been adopted unanimously, 45 votes for. Can you confirm, for the purpose of standing orders, Deputy Tadia, that your panel does not wish to scrutinise this matter?
Yes, thanks. We've scrutinised it already and we've issued a comments paper, so
Yes,
we do not wish to.
Thank you very much. Do you wish to propose the regulations, Minister, in second reading?
I do, sir. As members will see, there are only two, so I'll desire to take them en bloc, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Are the regulations seconded? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the regulations in second reading? Is the appel called for?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bell has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats and the greffier is asked to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously in second reading, 44 votes for. Minister, do you propose the matter in third reading?
If I may, sir, thank you.
And is the matter seconded?
Yes.
Does any member wish to speak on the regulations as adopted in third reading? Is the appel called for?
No, sir, standing vote will suffice, thank you.
Those in favour kindly show. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the regulations have been adopted unanimously in third reading, 44 votes for. The final item of public business is non-elected members on scrutiny panels and change in the Troy rule lodged by Deputy Scott, and the main respondents are the Chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee and the President of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee. And I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion: A, that the appointment to scrutiny panels of persons who are not states members should be permitted, on similar terms and with similar safeguards as non-states members may be appointed to the Public Accounts Committee, and subject to such further democratic safeguards as the Privileges and Procedures Committee and Scrutiny Liaison Committee may regard as appropriate, provided that the relevant scrutiny panel shall contain a minimum of 2 states members, including the chair and vice chair, and that the number of non-states members on that panel shall be no greater than 50% of the total membership of the panel. B, that the limit on the number of ministers and assistant ministers prescribed in Standing Order 112A for the purposes of Article 25A1 of the States of Jersey Law 2005 should be increased from 21 to 25. And C, to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward the necessary amendments to the Standing Orders of the States of Jersey to give effect to this proposition in time for the general election in 2026.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. So this proposition proposes 2 simple changes to standing orders to be brought forward by the Privileges and Procedures Committee. I wish to thank the Privileges and Procedures Committee and the Scrutiny Liaison Committee for the comments they have produced on this proposition. If adopted by the States Assembly, it would require very little work from the PPC in this term, and no further work from current Scrutiny Liaison Committee members, unless the chair of a scrutiny panel, with the support of other members of the SLC, should wish to have the benefit of the change in the standing orders before the election. Otherwise, the detail of the appointments and suitable safeguards with respect to Part A could be addressed after the election by the next Privileges and Procedures Committee and the next Scrutiny Liaison Committee, before any appointments of unelected panels on members on any scrutiny panel, should any scrutiny panel seek to benefit from the resourcing offered by Part A of the amendment. That would be on whatever terms the next PPC and SLC agree. So this proposition is about the organisation of resourcing. Contrary to fears amongst some members of this Assembly, it is not about taking power away from backbenchers, but about improving their clout. A positive response to this proposition, which was uninvited by me, was posted by the Policy Centre on LinkedIn. It includes a compliment of our Children Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny panel, so it could be worth sharing here. Scrutiny panels have an important role to play in Jersey's political system, Often they produce well-researched reports that should contribute to more effective policy making. Also, given the reluctance of many government departments to publish any information, scrutiny panels play a valuable role in making available statistics and analysis that would otherwise not be available. For example, the recent report on secondary education funding by the Children, Education and Home Affairs panel, chaired by Deputy Catherine Curtis, provides by far the best analysis of all aspects of secondary education in Jersey. The post goes on. However, the panels have limited resources and the pool of states members who sit on the panels is inevitably small. Expanding scrutiny panels to include suitably qualified local people could significantly increase their effectiveness. Sir, I could not have put it better myself. Parliamentary scrutiny is the process by which an elected parliament examines the actions and policies of members in executive roles to ensure accountability, legality, efficiency, and fairness. It therefore may disturb members that the comments of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee suggested the work of scrutiny is inherently political. Scrutiny should be an objective, impartial, and unpoliticised function. Its purpose is not to push a political agenda. Members may recall this point being made by the leader of the Reform Party, when members of that party first stood for roles of scrutiny chairs in the States Assembly en masse. It takes a certain mindset, aptitude and energy to scrutinise complex proposals and intricate legislation, to identify flaws and unseen consequences. The devil usually is in the detail, and it is understandable that not every states member is suited to it. The work demands and states members pulls them in many different directions, and they can't always pay attention to the detail that good parliamentary scrutiny work requires. Members of some panels may rely on scrutiny officers and other members to do such work more than the members of other panels do. Panels with a comparatively small number of members may struggle to scrutinise their workload more than other panels. Sir, the SRC's comments claim a lack of awareness of any comparable jurisdiction where lay members are appointed to the equivalent of scrutiny panels, and gave the example of UK select committees. Those comments fail to mention the work of the 780 unelected members of the House of Lords in the UK's Parliament. In the mother of all parliamentary systems in the Commonwealth, these unelected members have a scrutinising, revising and advisory role, extending to reviewing propositions, calling in bills, proposing amendments, and even running UK select committees. When recently introducing legislation to reform the House of Lords, for reasons I wholeheartedly support, Pat McFadden, a Labour Cabinet Office Minister, described the role of its unelected members as vital. The use of unelected people in the delivery of vital parliamentary work is not inherently democratic or even unusual. We have 6 unelected members of this very States Assembly whose participation in our work is restricted in some way. They support rather than compete with our various roles. Sir, this proposition does not propose that unelected members of scrutiny panels even have voting power on scrutiny panels, nor does it seek a separate bicameral chamber for unelected lay members engaged in the work of parliamentary scrutiny, or that those lay members include hereditary peers, lifetime members, or be appointed by the Chief Minister. That would be unnecessary, undemocratic, and certainly has not been required for the lay members of our Public Accounts Committee, whose code of conduct requires them to avoid being political. The UK, in the meantime, does not have unelected members on its own Public Accounts Committee. So at least our State Assembly has been progressive in that respect. Part A of this proposition proposes a simple amendment to standing orders to enable scrutiny panels of the future to better resource themselves to address gaps in numbers, experience, skills and dispositions in both their unelected officers and elected members, just like any highly performing and productive team would do, in a way that serves the public best. Our scrutiny function currently doesn't have access to such a vital resource, let alone the existence of one. In New Zealand, select committees have special advisors who can join in discussions but are not allowed to vote. The comments of both PPC and SLC suggest that we have no need of lay members to support the work of scrutiny panels because they can appoint special advisors. The Constable St Brelard suggested yesterday that scrutiny needed to be resourced in a way to balance the resourcing of government departments. Sir, in response to a question I asked her earlier in this state sitting, the chair of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee reported that all 6 panels represented by it have engaged only 5 special advisors over the course of the last 3 years at the cost of £62,025, well below its £200,000 budget for this year. So it's not a process that is employed by our scrutiny panels regularly. So at what cost is this reluctance to do so to the quality of scrutiny work? And why the reluctance, other than the potential cost? In a former role as a scrutiny chair, I and my fellow panel members followed the process for appointing a special advisor after starting a review into the island supply chain. It was painfully cumbersome. The next chair, if he had continued this review, would have gained a similar insight into the length and complications of drafting a tender and conducting the tender process, the comparison of cost estimates, the limitations of the panel's budget for a special advisor, which the panel had no control over, and the need to obtain the approval to the appointment of other SLC members who could have competing claims for budget, or dare I say, possibly political reasons for not being supportive of a chair or the work of a panel. Our economy has not grown in real terms for 20 years and needs to support government spending in other areas. The cost of our public sector and of this state's assembly has kept growing, with an impact on the offering and delivery of other public services. We are fighting against the deficit in government's overall operating account, with the Jersey Fiscal Policy Panel warning us of the depletion of reserves that protect our finances. The revenue expenditure of the state's GREF in 2024 was close to £10 million, compared to £7,479,000 in 2022, which is a percentage increase of nearly 30% in 3 years. The rate of government spending simply is not sustainable without resorting to unpopular measures such as cuts in budget or services and increasing taxes. At the same time, advances in knowledge, technology, general practice, and other developments continue across all areas of our island community as well as globally. States members' workloads are likely to increase without the support of additional financing or structural and systemic change. As was flagged by my fellow deputy of St Brelard, Deputy Renouf, during the debate in the last states meeting of his proposition to introduce differential pay for states members, the rate of salary set for our current number of states members has the effect of excluding a significant part of our relatively younger community from standing for election, and also their contribution of valuable knowledge and skills to the parliamentary business of a states member. The circus of electioneering, full-time work, the multitude of roles assumed by a states member, the 4-year term of service, and the culture are all disincentives to such people standing for election too. So many relatively high earners with valuable skills do not stand for election, but willingly give up some time to serve the public on a voluntary and usually a part-time basis. I know some members have difficulty with the concept of unpaid work, but for those who can afford to forgo payment for their time, it is their way of giving back to the community. Jersey's strongest resource is its community, which has become increasingly sophisticated over the years through its private investment and personal self-investment. So this is an opportunity for the States Assembly to demonstrate true leadership, innovative action, and inclusion. Why should we continue with a political system designed to exclude most people with relatively well-paid professional backgrounds, notwithstanding that 2 of the members of the Privileges and Procedures Committee and 4 out of 6 members of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee are members of the PPC's Diversity and Inclusivity Forum? Why the reluctance to see anyone with a professional background that is relevant to scrutiny work be given the power to make scrutiny itself more powerful? Could prejudice and the advancement of political ambitions even possibly be a reason for the obstruction of the delivery and support of the delivery of impartial, objective, and effective scrutiny? Having non-political individuals in roles traditionally seen as political helps to depoliticise the process by focusing the questioning on the subject matter, policy, and its impacts. Rather than political point scoring or character attacks, we can foster more constructive discussions focused on policy that better serve the public. The comments issued by the PPC mentioned an alternative way of resourcing scrutiny panels recommended by the members' remuneration reviewer. The amendment of standing orders to make participation in at least one scrutiny panel or the PAC compulsory for states members. Sir, I have been in the unsatisfactory position of chairing a scrutiny panel with only 2 members. But I am not a fan of compulsory labour. I am a fan of voluntary work and inclusion, subject to the safeguards that ensure that the parliamentary scrutiny function is depoliticised. I hope my fellow members might be like-minded and open-minded and will support this part of this proposition. Sir, I can be briefer on part B of the proposition, as the comments of the PPC and the SLC did not offer much in the way of reasoning for their positions. If we read between the lines of those comments, there appears to be an irrational fear of the loss of backbencher power. Jersey is unique in the privileges it gives to backbenchers. Most jurisdictions restrict the number of propositions that can be brought by backbenchers and the way in which they can bring them. In Jersey, any states member can bring a proposition and can for support for it across the whole of the States Assembly. There seems to be a suggestion that an elected majority can form a dictatorship. Democracy seeks that an elected majority make the decisions. The leader of the Reform Party in previous debates has advocated a political party system such as there is in the UK. That basically means having a parliamentary majority that is associated by a common manifesto. That democratic principle already applies in constituting the Council of Ministers. The elected Chief Minister, elected by a majority, constructs a coalition of ministers and assistant ministers who support his political agenda as set out at the time of his election. A majority of states members are asked to support a list of policy priorities known as the Common Strategic Policy. It would make no difference at that point whether the majority in support of that Common Strategic Policy comprised of states members in ministerial and assistant ministerial positions or not. Having more states members in ministerial and assistant ministerial roles enables a majority collective focus on a budget needed to support these agreed strategic policy priorities. That does not mean that states members in that number might not be persuaded to break ranks. This often happens in political party systems. The comments of the PPC suggested that budgetary control has not been a significant and unmanageable problem during ministerial government. I suggest those members look at the progress of the last two government plans, the rapid adjustment of budgets, and the most recent reports of the Fiscal Policy Panel. Sir, there is only so much that can be done by any number of states members. I come back to the principle of inclusion and quality of delivery. That includes the delivery of ministerial work too. I would suggest there is more useful work that can be done by a greater number of ministers and assistant ministers in delivering policies to serve our community, particularly in coordinating roles. Thanks to the current restriction on their number, for example, the coordination of sports and infrastructure work has been assumed by the Minister for Infrastructure in addition to the duties of the Constable St John. And who in government is coordinating the support of older people, including in the provision of accessible banking services and training in digital skills? Deputy Tadier suggested in the last state's meeting he had worked less as an assistant minister than at any time in his work as a states member. I'm not sure, and I'm afraid the deputy is absent from the chamber, but he perhaps can hear me. I'm not sure if that was because of the nature of the role or because he did not volunteer for other work. The majority of us could always find more work to do in our different roles, but we don't have the time to do that. Instead of the content of Part B of the proposition, I might have suggested a parallel system to the one I have proposed in Part A, whereby unelected political advisors are appointed to help out ministers. Such roles already exist in the parliamentary systems of the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Ireland, and Sweden. So this proposition offers an opportunity for the ministerial system to be more inclusive than it currently is towards backbenchers. It also offers a more inclusive system of scrutiny, which offers enhancement of the role of backbenchers serving in that area of government without diminishing backbencher power. For those reasons, it is in the public's interest, and I commend this proposition to the States Assembly for all the reasons given in this speech.
Is the proposition seconded? Thank you. Connétable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. Just to respond to something the Deputy said in her speech, the increase in the GREF budget represents growth of the GREF's restructure in order to provide greater support to members, such as the new constituency team, as well as a pension scheme for members, which is an essential investment if we are going to encourage new candidates to come forward. Members will have seen that PPC presented comments on Deputy Scott's proposition. PPC has concluded it cannot support either part of what the Deputy has proposed. I will not repeat everything PPC has included in its comments, but I will pick up on a couple of points. In relation to the idea of having non-states members on scrutiny panels, I would underline that scrutinising government is a fundamental role to which parliamentarians are elected. For those states members who do not sit on the government in the government of Jersey, it is expected that we should perform that function. I accept that it is not obligatory to sit on a scrutiny panel, but becoming a member of a panel is how we can fulfil our responsibilities to hold government to account. Permitting that role to be undertaken by non-elected people would be an abdication of that responsibility. In correspondence sent to all members over the weekend, the Deputy has cited the example of the House of Lords in the UK. Putting aside the fact that an unelected chamber is itself a matter of political debate in the UK, I do not see the analogy with what the Deputy is proposing here. The House of Lords is a second chamber that functions alongside the House of Commons. It does not replace the work of elected representatives, which is what the Deputy's proposition would achieve if adopted.
Sir, could I have just ask the member to give way?
Where to give way?
No, so I've had a long morning. Thank you, sir. In terms of the Troy rule, the committee cannot see what problem the Deputy is endeavouring to resolve by increasing the number of ministers and assistant ministers in the Government of Jersey. I'm not aware that the government has been particularly hampered by the existence of the Troy rule. In her email to members, the Deputy provided information on governments with parliamentary majorities, but they operate in jurisdictions with fully fledged party politics, which we don't have. If we did, it would be easier to see how increasing the numbers of ministers and assistant ministers to 25 might work, but that is not the case. I do not think we want a system where members could be encouraged to vote for the government simply because they are in government as a minister or assistant minister. Do we not rather want members to vote on the basis of principles, policies and manifestos? In a system where the majority of us do not belong to a party, do we not want our government and this Assembly to reach decisions on the basis of reasoned and rational debate? There were good reasons why the Troy rule was introduced and was appropriate for Jersey's parliamentary system, and those reasons remain as valid today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. I think both of these aspects of this proposition strive towards an overarching goal of ensuring that Jersey's government is equipped with the best talents, expertise and leadership to serve our community effectively and responsibly. Those are laudable ambitions. Scrutiny, of course, is a cornerstone of our democracy. It holds government to account, ensures transparency and fosters informed decision-making. Our current system relies primarily on elected states members to perform this essential function. While our Assembly is fortunate to have committed and capable members, I agree that it's unrealistic to expect every panel to have a deep subject matter expertise in all fields. The Clothier report emphasised the importance of scrutiny and a balanced government structure, highlighting that expert advice is crucial for effective governance. While elected officials bring democratic legitimacy, having more lay members on panels would create a different problem, and filtering out those who have applied to be on scrutiny panels who had vested interests or saw their role as representing lobby groups would present a huge challenge. We have seen the benefits of having lay members on panels such as the Public Accounts Committee to ensure thorough and independent financial oversight, but the remit of this panel is tightly drawn, and extending this model to other scrutiny panels is, in my view, not the way forward. In relation to the Troy rule, of course, the Assembly adopted the Troy rule in 2001 following the review of the machinery of government. And the rule under which the executive remains in the minority was designed to ensure that in the absence of party politics, the government would need cross-assembly cooperation to be able to deliver on its objectives. This includes the exclusion of assistant ministers from the sitting on the scrutiny panels. In effect, this means that we always operate with a minority coalition government. While the principle behind this restriction was well intended to ensure sufficient scrutiny and prevent excessive concentration of power, the realities of governance have demonstrated that this limitation can be counterproductive. The answer to this question, therefore, is rather than change the Troy rule, we should encourage more existing members and future candidates to join political parties and stand on a solid political agreed manifesto. Thank you for that foot stamping, sir. I don't want to turn this into a party political broadcast, sir, but Advanced Jersey has rebranded and is now open to existing members and new candidates. Seriously though, we face complex challenges that require strong ministerial oversight and governance. Departments dealing with healthcare, economic policy, infrastructure and education must be adequately staffed with political leadership to drive policies forward. The existing limit, whilst placing constraints on the number of members who have been involved in ministerial functions, does still encourage input and support from members who are not on the executive. There is no universal rule regarding the proportion of elected members who should serve in executive roles in other jurisdictions. So for these reasons, sir, while I'm glad that the Deputy has moved this proposition so that we can have this debate, I will not be supporting either parts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. This proposition asks us to make two big changes. First, allow people who are not elected to sit as members on scrutiny panels. Second, increase the number of ministers and assistant ministers by changing what we call the TRE rule. At first glance, these might seem like technical changes, but they would seriously affect how our democracy works and how we are held to account, all of us. So I would like to speak on two parts of the proposition in my different roles. Firstly, as a president of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, expressing views that were submitted in the comments from all chairs, with the part that asking to allow people who are not elected to become full members, to become members of the panel, to sit on the panel. What does it mean in practice? Let's reflect. Scrutiny panels holding ministers to account, reviewing legislation, scrutinizing policies, and challenging government's ministers' decisions. These are some of the most powerful democratic functions in our system. Deputy Scott said rightly, but we do have non-elected members sitting on the Public Accounts Committee, and in my other role as a chair of the Public Accounts Committee at the previous term, actually I needed to bring forward code of conduct, which we are still developing because of so many challenges that we had last term with non-elected members sitting on the Public Accounts Committee and expressing very political views in the public. It's very, very complex to hold the balance, and as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, I'm managing it day in and day out. I do receive comments from the public questioning some of the appointments to the Public Accounts Committee, and recently we did have a member of the Public Accounts Committee that actually decided that to stand down because has a very big passion to specific political views. And again, Public Accounts Committee, as rightly said, we are not questioning ministers. We are not getting involved in policies. We are not scrutinizing and influencing legislation. Public Accounts Committee looking back and questioning officers, not political representatives, not elected representatives, not ministers. Public Accounts Committee works with officers looking back how the States Assembly decisions were implemented, if the governance structures are correct in place to deliver what States Assembly decided, if the structures are in place and framework in place to deliver what the ministers intended to do. So, and this is the fundamental difference between Public Accounts Committee and scrutiny panels. And to be fair, when I was a new elected member, I did my parliamentary governance course for 9 months as a new elected member, 2019. And I remember I came with these ideas and I shared with other panel, let's have non-elected members on the scrutiny panel. I did have this idea personally, but when I looked and I discussed it with the coaches during the course, and we discussed at the CPA as well, how can it work? Would it be more beneficial, or it's actually compromise the democratic process of the scrutiny? And here we are. I didn't bring this proposition forward. I think it's clear which decision I made then. Now, about expert advice on the scrutiny. Absolutely. All of us cannot hold the breadth of knowledge and expertise that our work required. And we do use advisors. Some advisors are paid, and some advisors are unpaid. And as a scrutiny panel, usually we don't know what will come through the term, what the minister decide to bring forward as a policy and legislation. We did have some indications, but you never know what will happen in 4 years. How you ensure that you have the breadth and the depth of expertise on the scrutiny panel, which also represent views from all possible directions. We need to reach out to academy. We need to reach out to the experts in their specific field. And how you ensure that on, for example, environment, housing and infrastructure, we have lay members who expertise in all aspects of the bridging, island plan, offshore wind, waste strategy, housing, you name it, and ensure that they're all politically balanced. I think it's almost mission impossible to achieve on the panel. And I'm not sure if you need, because as a panel, you said, I have a specific question on liquid waste strategy, and I look and I search for advisors, and maybe probably from various sites, to get the expertise and invite them to give this expertise on this specific point to make sure that the scrutiny is evidence-based and robust on topics that we are scrutinizing at that moment. The system works well and allows panels to get experts when they need, while keeping decision in hands of the people that were chosen and elected by the public. By appointing non-elected people as formal members of scrutiny panels would be a step too far, from our perspective, and it would give unelected individuals influence over government policy without public ever having a say, actually. So I don't think how democracy would work. And this is why when we discussed as the chairs, we decided that we will oppose for this part of the proposition. Now I will speak as, in my other hat as a member, because it's my speech about the true role. We all know that no more than 21 members can be part of the government, which ensure that majority of the assembly is outside of the government. I'll not go into the party politics, but it's crucial for me because it leaves enough of us in the assembly to question decision, challenge the policies, and provide independent scrutiny. If we are raised to limit to 25, we will tip that balance. The government will become the majority in this assembly, and democratic balance will be broken, and the power to hold ministers to account will weaken. The Troy rule was created for a reason, to keep our democracy healthy, to ensure that government does not dominate this assembly, and there are always enough independent members to challenge it. If we change it, we risk reducing our ability to stand up for the public that elected us. I'm sure that all of us here in this assembly want to do the best for Jersey, but we must be careful not to fix problems by damaging the foundation of our democracy. We should protect the balance between government and the scrutiny and not to tip it in favor for more ministers. It strengthens us, it's strengthening our democracy, and let's not to weaken it. And for this reason, I urge you not to support this proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Jody Dublé.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the President of SLC. And I'm speaking today partly as chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel and therefore a fellow member of the Scrutiny Liaison Committee, but also I want to reflect briefly on some of my previous experiences in other roles. And note about the member who has brought this proposition, and I have every faith that she has really good intentions with this, and it's clear that the member cares very much about effective democracy, and I believe that is the motivation behind this. And indeed, Deputy Gardner mentioned that she had raised the idea of having lay members on scrutiny panels herself, and it's something that I have asked officers about in the past and thought that it might have been a good idea, but then after the advice given and reflecting, decided that it was not a good idea. And I want to respond to some of the points that the Deputy made in her opening speech. First of all, having lay members will not necessarily make scrutiny more diverse. I think that's something that we need to take responsibility for in the work that we're doing to encourage more diverse election candidates, which I feel the GREF are doing very well at the moment. It also will not necessarily make scrutiny more objective, because every single human being has views, whether they're a parliamentarian or not, and they would be required to set those aside to do the work of scrutiny in exactly the same way that we are required to set them aside as states members when we do that work. And Deputy Gardner has spoken about this. We are objective and evidence-based in our approach. It's deeply embedded in scrutiny, and there are officers advising on this, and the very first piece of advice that officers give to somebody who is newly appointed to a scrutiny panel is that. It's very clear from the beginning that we set our political views aside, and every meeting, certainly every meeting that I chair, our conflicts are declared at the beginning of the meeting. That's in every single meeting, and that's the time when we can declare any strongly held views, and then we set them aside and we go into the meeting. We're not operating in isolation as a group of states members on scrutiny. It's not the Wild West. It is one of the most rigorously structured systems that we have in our parliament. I'm really proud of our scrutiny system, actually, and I think when we travel to other parliaments, that becomes really clear that we can be really, really proud of that. And I'm going to mention the officers again, because if anybody looks like they are perhaps veering towards being political, officers will advise us. You can be sure they will point that out to us. That's part of their job, so that we can correct our course. And in terms of advisors, so years ago, I'll go back to another point that the Deputy made. And the Deputy mentioned that she wanted to depoliticise the process and to prevent political point scoring or character attacks. And I was quite concerned to hear that language, actually, because, and I want to very clearly refute this view that that might be held by the Deputy or anybody, because certainly for this SLC that I'm part of and the wider scrutiny membership, the integrity and the hard work that I see in scrutiny and the body of members who are part of scrutiny, I'm really proud of that, and I would like that to be put on the record. So moving on to advisors. So years ago, more than 10 years ago, when I was first appointed as scrutiny chair, the use of advisors who are effectively lay people taking part in the work of a scrutiny panel, they were used far more frequently. I think pretty much every single scrutiny review, there was an advisor appointed for that review. And again, that was something I reflected on. I think I was the first scrutiny chair to put in a process for appointing advisors, of interviewing advisors and making sure that they were carefully selected for their skills to fit the review. And over the years, scrutiny has done its part in giving up part of its budget. So we've had many different money-saving cuts, economising programmes that have come through this assembly, and scrutiny has done its part. And at one point, I recall, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our budget was cut in half. And we made those savings, I think, largely by reducing our use of advisors. And what the Deputy has done with this proposition, and I want to thank her for this, is she has forced us to reflect on this. And I have looked at the budget, and I think something that I can take from this proposition, so just to be clear, I won't be voting for any part of this proposition, but I think some good has come of it, because in terms of my own reflection, I do think that we have maybe swung too far the other way, and that we don't actually use advisors enough. And I think as particularly we need to make better use of academic advisors. What we're currently doing is writing to academics and asking for their views, but of course academics don't always want to give their time for free. And I think we could make better use of that. I also just want to remind the Assembly that we do have a team of highly skilled researchers who support the scrutiny officers and the scrutiny officers themselves, who are able to source that academic research for us. So that didn't used to be there when all we had really was, I think, maybe one officer and we could use an advisor. So scrutiny has evolved. I think we can continue to evolve. And personally, I commit to taking the intention behind this proposition, and I'm sure we will reflect on that at the Scrutiny Liaison Committee and take on board what we can. But I won't be voting for the part about lay members, and I certainly, for all the reasons that Deputy Gardner so adequately outlined, and I'm sure other members will, I will very firmly not be voting to remove the Troy rule, because I believe in a democratic assembly, and it's quite simply undemocratic to remove that.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable Greville.
Thank you, sir. I rise to take umbrage with some of the comments made by the Deputy. I think our scrutiny panel, the Children, Education and Home Affairs scrutiny panel, sir, have hardly changed. Even after the change of government, we remained the same. And therefore, as a relatively inexperienced member of this House, I've only served 3/4 of my first term, but I've been on that panel for 3 years, and I'm now currently the vice chair of it. And I totally refute the implication that there's any politicising on that scrutiny panel. We scrutinise 3 ministers: the Minister for Children, the Minister for Home Affairs, and the Minister for Education. And the Minister for Education, sir, is a member of the Reform Party. And have I seen the chair, Deputy Catherine Curtis, ever give the Minister for Education an easy ride? Look at that face. He has quoted, and I'll quote him right now, in front of Deputy Curtis, and said, "She is the bane of his life, sir." So I will say that politicised, I do not think so. I've never once seen it. And the chair works very hard, as do our officers, and we are very well supported by those. I won't mention any more because others have said so. So I will not allow the deputy to say that we are politicised in any way. Also support the Troy rule in all its forms, and I hope it will remain so ad infinitum. That's all I have to say, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable St Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I won't repeat things that have been said. If I'm paid by the word, I'd be a very poor man. I do have a great deal of sympathy with Deputy Scott regarding this predicament, but there is no way I can actually support any part of this whatsoever, however well-intentioned it is. And I would remind members, at the end of the last state sitting we had, we did have one deputy complaining vociferously that he'd not been invited onto any panels at all. I believe he has now been invited onto Deputy Tadia's panel, and I congratulate them for that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Some of what I wanted to say has been said already, but I did want to make some comments about Deputy Scott's opening speech in particular. I think her opening comment was she thinks our clout needs improving. I don't think our clout needs improving, certainly my experience of scrutiny. She also talks about people who are suitably qualified, and I asked the question, in what way? Is that from membership of a lobby group? Is that by academic learning? Is that by reputation? Indeed, lots of members of this Assembly have got very high and professional qualifications that they bring to very good use in the scrutiny function. So the experience that Deputy Scott has described is not one that I recognise. I have a very hard-working, committed, experienced panel who cope admirably with the workload, and all of them have roles on other panels, and that indeed is one of the strengths of our panel. I also have a full panel. I never had any trouble recruiting members to our panel, and indeed other panel chairs are the same. So I don't identify any gaps in skills or disposition. We work to our strengths. But if we need to fill a gap, if we recognise that we don't have enough experience or knowledge about a particular area, we will ask people who are experts to come and talk to us, and that might be paid or unpaid. One of the things that Deputy Scott also said was that some of us had a problem with unpaid work. I certainly don't have a problem with unpaid work. Previously, I've done a lot of it, and I know a lot of people in this Assembly currently do. And I also want to refute the allegation of prejudice and political point scoring, and that is something that the Connétable of Grouville has articulated. So I don't find myself in a position that that Deputy Scott observes. As I've said, most people have said what I want to say about lay people on scrutiny panels, but I think I just want to talk about my own experience. Like Deputy Scott, I was actually a lay member of the Public Accounts Committee. My term followed hers in 2020 until I stood for election in 2022. And my role from the outset was very clear, and I was selected for my specific skill set for a very particular review, following a Controller and Auditor General report. Whilst my expertise was useful to the panel, I had a very specific role, and I understood it very well. I understood that I had no authority from the electorate. I was not accountable to the public. I could not be held responsible through an election. I didn't represent the views of any electorate. The core activity, as we've heard, of the PAC is very, very different. It does not hold ministers to account, it doesn't review legislation, and it doesn't make any comment on policy. It's about balance and the careful equilibrium between executive power and democratic scrutiny that underpins our parliamentary system. So it's my view that the addition of lay members on scrutiny panels would upset the balance. At the beginning of the term, panels don't really know what they'll be scrutinising, and most panels have a dual or a triple role, scrutinising one or more ministers. Things that are of interest to the public pop up after we've created our manifesto, after we've stood on a political platform. And as we've already heard, we don't know what sort of expertise is going to be needed until the reviews are properly scoped. And we've already heard that panels are able to recruit expertise in different ways, and some of that will be paid, some of it will be unpaid. If I cast my mind back to the citizens' jury on assisted dying, I was a member of the steering group. Every single member, every single person who gave evidence to that citizens' jury was unpaid. And that included medical professionals, it included academics, it included international experts who were pro, against, and on the fence of assisted dying. So we have some examples of where that works particularly well without seconding people, if you like, onto panels. So that's all I'm going to say about scrutiny panels. The second part of the proposition wants to amend the so-called Troy rule. And it's my understanding that the Troy rule exists as a safeguard, not as some arbitrary cap. It's a very deliberate mechanism rooted in the Clothier report, as we've heard, and the principles of good governance to ensure that a majority of this Assembly remains outside the executive and therefore able to scrutinise, able to challenge and to hold ministers to account. I think this proposal would erode that safeguard. It would allow the executive to approach or even exceed parity with the backbench, and in doing so, it would blur the lines between the executive and those who scrutinise. Deputy Scott also tells us that this would improve budgetary discipline, but I'm not convinced there's any evidence of that. The fiscal policy panel's concerns about public finances are very real, but they're not caused by the Troy rule. If anything, they underscore the need for stronger scrutiny, not weaker. The answer to fiscal drift is not to pack the executive with more voices, in my opinion, but to really empower those who question it. We're told that other island jurisdictions do things differently. That might be true, but Jersey's not Malta, it's not Gibraltar, it's not Australia. We're a small jurisdiction with a unique political culture, and one that lacks party structures that might otherwise provide internal checks and balances. I would argue that in Jersey, scrutiny is not a luxury, it's our only line of defence. So at a time when public trust in government, we're told, is already fragile, I'm concerned that expanding the executive risks sending the wrong message, that power is actually being consolidated and concentrated, not shared, and that accountability is being diluted and not strengthened. And I don't want to abandon that principle lightly, so I will be rejecting both elements of this proposition to protect the balance, protect scrutiny, and ultimately protect public trust. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Renner.
Thank you, sir. I too can shorten my speech because some points have been very excellently made. But I do think one thing that hasn't been pointed out is what we have here is a rather complex situation. There are, in effect, 3 different options hidden within this proposition, all of which need to be addressed. The 3 options before us are to pass Part A, to pass Part B, or pass Parts A and B. And the implications of choosing any of those 3 different options are very different. It seems to me in a nutshell that if we pass Part A and not Part B, we will be adopting a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. If we pass Part B and not Part A, then we'll be creating a problem but removing the potential solution. And if we pass Part A and B, we will be solving problems for which solutions already exist. If I start with Part A, scrutiny, as many people have said, does use outside advisors. There is a mechanism already in existence to make use of outside expertise where required. And as Deputy Gardner said, it is bespoke to the problem, as professional expertise should be. And it allows flexibility, enabling reaction to what government brings forward. Or to put another way, if we were to have lay members on scrutiny panels, we would still need to have expert advisors in order to respond to those changes in situation. Only 5 scrutiny panels apparently have used outside experts this term, which the Deputy thinks isn't enough. I can say from my own point of view, there is no reluctance to make use of that facility. The review panel I chaired did make use of that process. The question of politicisation is worth examining. Scrutiny should, of course, not be political in the sense of left and right or in the sense of making purely political points, ideological points. But it is also true that in the very broadest sense, all work of scrutiny is inherently political. A criticism or proposed reform of a government proposal in scrutiny is political in the broader sense, even when it is based on rigorous, objective, impartial analysis, because it is a point of view that contradicts a minister or government's position. But I think adding lay members would politicise scrutiny in a new dimension. Would we not see a case where a prominent business person is chosen to sit on a panel, leading to perhaps a union arguing that they too should have a seat at the scrutiny table? Membership of scrutiny panels would surely become a contested area because the work of scrutiny panels affects policy in the future. But the lay members would have this power without an electoral mandate and without accountability. The proposer's solution to the potential politicisation of these lay roles is to have a code of conduct or restricted voting rights or to fine-tune recruitment. All of them are minefields because the work of scrutiny is fundamentally political in the broadest sense, but the roles of politicians and potential lay members in this regard are completely different. Members of this assembly are accountable for our actions to the electorate. No such accountability would exist for lay members. And that to me seems to be the key point. So I don't think the case has been remotely made for Part A. In terms of Part B, I'm not aware of a single jurisdiction where the executive is granted an automatic majority. Under the Troy rule, let us recall, the executive has to find 4 votes to achieve a majority. Just 4 votes. I would respectfully submit that when a government cannot find 4 non-executive votes, it should probably be looking at what it is proposing. And I'm happy to include the government of which I was a part in that observation. I think it is wrong in principle to try and construct a parliamentary majority without an electoral mandate. We have the Troy rule as a safeguard against an overmighty executive that might try and achieve excessive power without having won electoral backing for its programme. Remembering that our governments are built by the Assembly, and that will remain the case until a party or coalition of parties achieve a parliamentary majority, at which point the Troy rule becomes functionally irrelevant. But what really condemns this proposition is the failure to offer any justification for the creation of new ministerial or assistant minister positions. Nowhere is there an analysis of the failure of government that is a consequence of the lack of ministers or assistant ministers. This proposition is purely about stuffing the ministerial ranks with enough bodies to create a majority. It doesn't matter whether they are needed for good government or not. That case has not been made, not even addressed. The Chief Minister has talked frequently about the swelling of government bureaucracy, about how posts have been created without enough thought for whether they are really needed, and the need to be extremely careful about creating new positions. This proposition does not apply the same rigour to the construction of the executive. I could teasingly suggest that the Chief Minister might have other reasons for wanting to support this, given the little local difficulty I believe he had in maybe promising more than 21 posts in his government at the time of the vote of no confidence 18 months ago. We'll wait to see whether that was what the Chief Minister's position is. The argument for Part B uses a diversion to make the case. Budget discipline is required, according to the proposition, and the way to do it is to make sure that the government has a majority. This is so faulty in logic that it is quite hard to know where to begin. It presupposes that all governments are completely committed to budget discipline, which, by the way, isn't defined, when there's nothing to say that government is. And it fails to make the link between the government's lack of a built-in ministerial majority on the one hand and budgeting discipline on the other. This is particularly so because there has not been a case of which I'm aware when the government has failed to get its budget through. So the budget ill-discipline, which the Deputy argues needs to be corrected by giving the government an inbuilt majority to get its way, has in fact been caused by the government getting its way. It has not been the failure of scrutiny to control costs that has driven the lack of fiscal control. To the extent that a lack of fiscal control exists, it has been deliberate government policy. It is true that backbench and scrutiny amendments have tinkered at the edges, but I cannot think of any backbench or scrutiny amendment that has been responsible for catastrophic budget ill-discipline, and certainly the Deputy hasn't mentioned an example in her report. The Deputy says the proposition is more inclusive and it doesn't affect backbench power. Neither are true. It is only more inclusive for those extra 4 members who get added to the executive. It is even more exclusionary for those who are not selected. And of course it reduces backbench power. That is the whole point. According to the proposer herself, it is designed to enable it to be easier for the government to get things through. So in summary, as far as I can see, the problem as defined doesn't exist. The arguments in favour of the proposition fall apart under examination. The supposed solution introduces multiple unintended and negative consequences, and no evidence has been presented to either explain the problem or justify the solutions. In other words, it's a bad set of solutions to a non-existent set of problems. Apart from that, I love it.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. So when I first heard of the Troy Rule, because I wasn't a States member at the time, I just simply thought there'd been a spelling mistake and that somebody had mixed up the two letters in between the four-letter word. Because I thought that the Troy Rule, or the Tory Rule as I thought it had been misspelled, was just the rule up until that point which said that 90% of any States Assembly had to be filled with Tories, and it didn't really matter about the other 10%. It was only that when I read it a bit more closely, and I'm looking at the proposition by, of course, the eponymous Peter Troy, Deputy of St Bullard, who was my predecessor, it said, and what he said in his proposition and in amendment to the Machinery of Government proposals was that the 10% margin, which I'm suggesting, is to create a fraction that can be used to separate the executive from the non-executive. So in other words, that, as he put it, the number not involved in the executive must exceed the executive by at least 10%. What that meant in his assembly was that there were 53 members, and that 10% of 53 was 5.3, so you round that up for good practice. That means that there had to be a differential of 6. The first question I'd like to ask actually is just a technical one. At what point did the differential change? Because actually, as I currently understand it, there's a maximum of 21 that can serve in the executive. But if we do the maths, we've got a 49-member assembly. So 4.9 would be 10% of that. We round it up to 5%. So there should be a differential of 5. So the maximum number should be 22, because 22 plus 5 is 27, and 22 plus 27 gives us the 49. So the starting point is that the Council of Ministers are selling themselves short, because they could actually, if they were applying the spirit of the Troy Rule, which was the 10% difference, he could have another, the current Chief Minister could have another member for the executive if he wanted to. I'm not sure if he does, and I'm not putting myself forward for that either. But actually, I come back to what this proposition seeks to do, and what I'll simply say, because I don't want to keep members, is that the problem with this proposition is that it's muddled, it's confused, and it's mutually contradictory between Part A and B, which I think has been alluded to. So on the one hand, it's saying that there's not enough people to do scrutiny work, yet Part B says let's take out 4 more members who are currently on scrutiny, potentially, so that they can join the executive and give the executive a majority. So presumably more work for scrutiny, because there's more bodies to do the work on the executive side, but fewer bodies to do that. And of course, then we have this muddled solution to say, but the way we deal with that is to draft more people in from the outside who don't have an elected mandate. So it's very bizarre. I think if the deputy were trying to resolve one problem, it might be that if she wants a less powerful government, if she wants a government that doesn't automatically get things through, or reduces the chance of that and enables more people to do scrutiny, the answer is not to increase the executive, but to reduce it. And I, for one, would be willing to give consideration to actually having a much slimmed down executive. I think the executive could probably function on 11 to 15 members, and that actually one way to do that would be to abolish assistant ministers. I was listening, by the way, when the deputy gave her introduction, and I was in the coffee room listening intently. It's just sometimes in here with the differences in temperatures, you've got cold air blowing from one direction, maybe hot air blowing from another direction, and it can get quite uncomfortable. So I sometimes do retire out there, but I'm following on very closely with what is being said. And I think, of course, the question of assistant ministers does need to be examined very carefully, because as I've said before, there are assistant ministers who are effectively full ministers that are given a great deal of responsibility, who actually might be ministers in their own right, and also assistant ministers in other departments. So I do think there needs to be that flexibility. But what I would much prefer to see is that all ministers are elected by this assembly, so all the executive is elected, that they have tangible portfolios to which they can answer, and that maybe an answer would be to actually increase the percentage of the Troy rule, not from the 10%, but maybe to 20 or 30%. And so that's food for thought for whoever might wish to engage with that, either this current PPC or a future PPC. But certainly the answer for me, if there is a problem here, is not in adopting any of these proposals. So shall I'll let you move the adjournment, or should I move it?
You can move it. Before we do move it, shall I invite members who wish to speak, who have not yet spoken, to indicate that they do wish to speak on this matter? Are there any members who wish to speak? No. So the Chief Minister wishes to speak, is that right?
No, sir. I was just wondering if no members wishes to speak, I'd just test the mood in the room to see if it's worth extending.
That's why I was asking that question.
Okay, sorry.
So no member wishes. Deputy Curtis, do you wish to speak?
I was just being very quick to second the Chief Minister on that.
Are members content to continue? I invite Deputy Scott to respond.
Sir, I thank members for their contributions to this debate. The focus of this proposition is on community, both the one outside and inside this assembly. It's about the policies and legislation that we adopt for the community and how we make and deliver them and ensure they serve our community optimally. It's about our culture as a States Assembly, how we within the States Assembly choose to support each other or not, how we engage with a community resource outside this Assembly, and how we can improve the services we lead as States members at a cost that better supports our community. The comments of the PPC and SLC, and indeed on some members, state that they are unclear about what the problem is that this proposition seeks to solve. In the case of Part A, I hope that the bumpy progress of recent propositions brought by the PPC has helped to illustrate the problem when there is not enough scrutiny before a matter is brought before to debate. Because it seems that the use and understanding of scrutiny as a resort or by States members may need more development there to assist a better quality of debate. Turning to the comments, which I'll try and group together as much as I can, members, I think the first point I perhaps will make is that some chose to take offence at the idea that I suggested that the scrutiny process can be politicised. It can be. That is the unfortunate truth. I'm not saying it is right now, but I also was emphasising that the value of including unelected members, as is done in the House of Lords, is to produce a resource, and it's not actually undemocratic because they're not given the same rights to participate as elected members. They are recognised for contributing specific skills, whatever they are, to the process of scrutiny. And if anybody wants me, and there's, sorry, sir, I'm distracted by the talk. Thank you. So let's come to the chair of PPC, since I think she needs some attention. So she has actually suggested that I had sought to replace States members with unelected members. And I believe that that's not actually what I'm saying. I'm not saying get rid of States members, although I'm sure many people would like to see fewer in their number. I'm saying let's use a resource to support the delivery of scrutiny. I'm not diminishing the efforts of current members. I'm saying let's expand and build upon them in the same way that we have seen in other jurisdictions that produce much more in the way of the sort of work that scrutiny function does here because of the additional resource of those members. I mean, the House of Lords, I mean, let's face it, there's quite a few people who needn't be there, but their actual work that they do, the contributions that they make, is huge in terms of the area of scrutiny. But what we're hearing is people saying, well, we don't want that because we're good enough. That, perhaps suggests a lack of inclusion and humility. I don't deny that the scrutiny parliamentarians are elected for the scrutiny function, but not all of them do it. And I'm not suggesting that they should be forced to do it either. Deputy Ferry, he basically was just saying that talking about the benefits of having a parliamentary majority if you have a political party, and I'm sure we're all rushing to sign up. The chair of the SLC, we are not elected to work on our own, but to work with others in producing our work. She mentioned the challenges in chairing the PAC in terms of the behaviour of individual members, and also that they were working on further amending their code of conduct. But here's the point, she either manages or she doesn't. She either thinks it's a good idea to have those members in that panel, or she doesn't. And she found the work challenging. The job of a states member is to be challenged constantly within the confines of our own code of conduct if we are challenging each other. Bad choices can be asked to step down. So, the bad choices can be asked to step down, but she hasn't proposed yet that the constitution of the PLC exclude unelected members, and that at least is consistent with the principle of inclusion and diversity. She also mentioned that getting the balance right is mission impossible. That applies with respect to our States Assembly in terms of spread of resourcing too. We aren't in control of the elections, thank gosh. And the results and what we have in the States Assembly's result can be very different. She did not address the nature of parliamentary majorities and how small jurisdictions respond to them, given that political party systems, as I've already mentioned in my opening speech, aren't generally adopted in small jurisdictions for the reasons discussed, but their purpose is to produce a parliamentary majority. You can cut it in different ways. The Deputy Dublé, she mentioned that she and Deputy Gardner had considered lay members but were discouraged by GREF officers. That's what he said, I'm sorry.
Would the member give way so I can
Yes,
clarify?
of course.
I said I was advised. I didn't actually disclose what the advice was.
Okay, she was advised by GREF officers who, one may presume, didn't go for encourage her to proceed with that idea. But I appreciate that the advice given by her reason for wanting to keep the advice that most personally given to her by GREF officers confidential. We need to set political sides. Sorry, sir, I'm just trying to. I'm going to open, close this because I am trying to address these various comments. Yeah, so I just wondered if she said that when scrutiny members are working together, they need to set political views aside. I very much hope she's not suggesting that unelected members would not be able to do the same. The quality of output of the UK parliamentary work would be diminished without the House of Lords, and I don't think there's been much consideration of that. But I am glad that she's working well with other SLC members. She mentioned the decline in use of special advisors, scrutiny, and scrutiny having given up part of its budget, but highly skilled research.
Sorry, sir, shouldn't it be through the chair and not use the word she?
Thank you very much. Yes, it's through. Well, she is. Well, it's third party. It's not you. But yes, it's rather better to refer to a member by their title, if you can.
Sorry,
Yes, Deputy.
so are you saying I shouldn't use some personal pronouns?
Well, no, I think it's appropriate probably not to do it continually. Yes, I don't think this is a big issue, but a matter of courtesy would normally refer to a member by their title.
Thank you, sir. Highly skilled researchers still need to ask the right questions. They be asked to look into the right questions, and that is again where the inclusion of unelected members in the scrutiny process has proved value. Let's just. So at the end of the day, I suppose I'm just asking who would members be representing if Part A of the proposition is rejected? Maybe some of us have flicked through the Jersey Evening Post and noticed a common theme in its columnists and what they say. Advocate Carl Parslow, who chairs the Jersey Consumer Council voluntarily. Jersey is not short of talent. It brims with corporate professionals, entrepreneurs, technocrats and civil society leaders. The island punches above its weight in finance, law, digital sport and many other areas, but its political system is increasingly divorced from its reservoir of skill. Chris McFadden states now lacks the spectrum of members who have in-depth commercial experience. What value might non-voting members bring to scrutiny? Look at the way that scrutiny has been reviewing and amending legislation for years. During my own term as a States member, I've sought red-lined versions of proposed amended laws to make scrutiny work easier. It does make scrutiny easier. That contribution towards the scrutiny process was the result of my professional background. Why did the States Assembly have to wait for somebody with a background like mine to be elected to request this? When most people like me shy from standing for election for the reasons I mentioned in my opening speech, to do with the circus, to do with a 4-year term, to do with a salary. If someone of a similar background had been included as a non-voting member, perhaps only for a term or 2 years at a time, the job of scrutiny would have been made easier and more efficient years ago. I also suggest the comments that have shown a lack of long-term vision. It would be for a scrutiny panel to assess whether it would benefit from the inclusion of a resource, which the proposition does not seek to force upon them. Such a future resource to any scrutiny panel of the future would be on the terms that PPC and the SLC would agree, including the safeguarding measures mentioned, including a code of conduct that would need to be enforced by the chair, and presumably that would be part of the role of a chair, and they would do that. So how confident can the community be that scrutiny panels right now are asking the best questions in areas like the economy, supply chain, and the cost of living that would best expose flaws in ministerial thinking, policy officer work, and proposed legislation? Are the questions being asked by some scrutiny panels too easy for ministers to dodge? Would some of them benefit from the technical and objective eyes of those with more local knowledge and direct experience and of details affecting these areas? 2 out of 4 members on the scrutiny panel currently are members of the same political party. Other jurisdictions would require membership more proportionate to the jurisdiction of party membership amongst the States Assembly. Now, while the chair of that panel may not be seeking to reach beyond to the island's community to help redress that balance, Why might he not just support the changing orders, standing orders? I hope that the fear of challenge is not an issue, because that is what scrutiny is supposed to be about. Conversely, as with the Political Accounts Committee, should non-elected areas and members step beyond the line, they can be brought into account themselves. You don't have to be, how can I say, elected to do the role of scrutiny, but yes, we are elected to do that. There is a difference. Whatever we vote, we are making a decision about the future of the island and the place we want it to be. Will it be a place that maximises its productivity in all areas in the most cost-effective, inclusive way? Or could it be seen as a place run by a non-inclusive and reactionary group of members with continually decreasing support of the island's voters because of an avoidance of states members to engage with them in a mutually productive way? If we have islanders, which we do, with those skills and experience, we should not be pushing them away or confining their contributions to offering responses in the context of occasional and frequent reviews initiated by panels. So positive change often is hard fought and meets with resistance. That's how the vote was denied to women. That's how apartheid policies existed. Did states members receive an avalanche of emails asking them not to support this proposition? And how many states members sought to engage with our community to seek views on its principle of inclusion? Perhaps there's an irony there. So let's think again to the purpose of this, to deliver more joined-up policy and more effective scrutiny without succumbing to an irrational fear of the loss of power each one of us as an elected member has. Let's show appreciation and respect to a skilled and informed community outside this state's assembly and use our power to be more inclusive and use the resources we have within that community and in this state's chamber more productively. To deliver the positive change that voters want from us and that we want from them, surely we should start changing how we do things. So, food for thought, whether or not we support this proposition, that members support this proposition, sir. I urge them to support them and think about the messaging to the community outside there. I call for the appel, taking the proposition in separate parts.
So you seek a vote on A and B. And of course, if A and B are not adopted, then C falls away. So I invite members to return to their seats. The appel has been called for. And the first vote will be on Part A of the proposition in relation to the appointment to scrutiny panels of persons who are not states members. I invite the Greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the Greffier to close the voting. That's that Part A has been rejected. 3 votes pour, 42 votes contra, and no abstentions.
We have the 3, please.
Those members voting for, Deputies Labby, Scott and Moore.
I'll move on to Part B. That the limit on the number of ministers and assistant ministers prescribed by Standing Order 112A should be increased from 21 to 25. I invite the Greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the Greffier to close the voting. And Part B has been rejected, 1 vote pour, 44 votes contra. Part C accordingly falls away. The chair of PPC will make a personal statement.
Thank you, sir. And I know that everybody's had a very long morning, so please bear with me. It's quite a short statement. I've been a member of PPC since the beginning of 2021 and have served as chair since I was elected at the start of this assembly in 2022. Across this term, we have delivered a number of important initiatives. We are all aware that the electoral turnout in Jersey is shockingly low. And for an island that speaks fondly of its democratic institutions and consensus-driven government, it is imperative that our words are met by delivering a more engaged and democratically active electorate. It has been the central focus of the Privileges and Procedures Committee throughout my time as chair to make sure that this issue is addressed in a proactive, constructive and welcoming manner. Our work has been headlined by two key policies to make voting as easy as possible. Our election day has been moved to a Sunday, and we are making registration to vote more straightforward for islanders through the introduction of the automatic voter registration. As chair, I was part of the appointment process for our Commissioner for Standards after we joined with Guernsey to create a pan-island role for the first time. PPC has also undertaken consultation with members on revisions to the Code of Conduct, and those changes will be coming back to the Assembly for debate in the autumn. My committee has been charged and challenged with bringing forward in short time the legislation for the return of senators to the Assembly, and I am pleased to report that this newly drafted legislation will be lodged before the summer recess for it to be debated in September. Alongside our aims for greater turnout and democratic engagement and supporting the Assembly's decisions on the composition of the Assembly, we have provided significant improvements in the support available for members by establishing offices in Hill Street. This has been complemented by increased pastoral support through access to coaching and continued professional development, and the launch of our highly valued constituency team, whose impact has been felt island-wide. I have been extremely privileged to have served as chair of PPC through these last 3 years, and I am extremely proud of the way my committee has met with turbulence and challenges. As chair, I've always strived to be an independent for the sake of the Assembly and for the good of the Assembly, making sure that this role becomes the focus of my duties in this chamber. It has been challenging, but it has also been deeply rewarding. The chair of PPC is the leader of this Assembly, this Parliament, the States, and I've worked hard on a daily basis to be available to all to provide both support and a listening ear. After 3 years, I feel that it is now the right time to stand down. I'm extremely grateful to both my committees, those who were members of PPC pre the vote of no confidence, and those who are current members. I am proud of all that we have achieved and our ongoing work programme. The role is demanding in ways that are hard to define or explain, not only because of their scope and complexity, but the fact that this role deals with matters that cut to the heart of members' lives. It is, on occasion, exceptionally demanding. It requires a daily level of care and discretion that must be coupled with a genuine love of this Assembly as a democratic institution, and a drive to offer the support members need. It is essential that the chair knows when they have offered what they can, and that is the time to let somebody else take over. A core tenet of representative democracy is to be replaced, and I hope that my successor will benefit from the experience they will receive over the coming months and the insights they will gain. I must thank all members of both PPC and the chairs and members of PPC subcommittees who have allowed our successes to take root. I would also like to record my ever grateful thanks to the greffier, the deputy greffier and all those who support us in the gref. My thanks are also extended to the bailiff and deputy bailiff, the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and I would also like to thank this Assembly. As you would be aware, the procedure is that as soon as I resign, I am no longer the chair. The PPC committee still stands until a new chair is elected, which will hopefully be at the next state sitting. Nothing will fall. This is, in part, because PPC is neither government nor scrutiny. It is a separate part of this Assembly, and it is vital that it stays this way so that it may represent the whole Assembly. It is an essential part of the continuity of representation, where public service for the public good should be pursued and championed. PPC is not the place for egos. It is a place to help determine how we can maximise the effectiveness of this Assembly. It is where we manage our island community. The chair is just one part of a community that develops through consensus, and the committee must be able to live beyond the chair. Change may occasionally be slow, but this is because of this committee's commitment to get it right. A chair must be open to new ideas and to building support across this chamber, and I would not stand down without knowing how many members embody these traits. I wish my successor and committee the best of wishes. Chairing PPC is both challenging and fascinating in equal measure, and this is a unique honour and a privilege that should never be taken lightly. I hope my successor and committee will provide it with the energy, the commitment and success it deserves. I look forward to supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes public business for this meeting. I invite the Vice Chair of PPC to propose the arrangements of public business for future meetings. Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. And before proposing the arrangement of public business, I'd like to just take a moment to sincerely thank Constable Shenton-Stone for her dedication and leadership as Chair of PPC this term. Speaking from experience, I know firsthand that it is a challenging role, one that often involves considerable effort behind the scenes with little recognition. So her commitment has gone unnoticed, so thank you, and I wish her all the best in whatever she decides to do going forwards. So there have been a couple of changes since the publication of the consolidated order paper.
Yes.
The Health and Care Jersey Advisory Board and Partnership Board P.28 of 2025 has been lodged and listed for debate at the September meeting. In addition, 2 amendments have also been lodged for the draft residential tenancy Jersey Amendment Law, although the EHI scrutiny panel has already indicated to members that it will ask for the draft law to be referred to if the principles are adopted when the debate takes place. I think it's also worth noting and highlighting to members that the debate on the amended Code of Conduct is also listed for the September sitting. So there are quite a number of propositions listed for the next sitting. This is the last sitting of the Assembly before the summer recess, and we may well have to sit on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday to complete the business listed. So with that, sir, I propose the arrangement of public business for future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Deputy Tadia.
So I had a question about when we can expect the Senators' legislation to come back. I know the outgoing chair said that it was September. Is that the first sitting in September, or is it anticipated that it'll be the 30th, the end of the month? Or do we know yet?
Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. I don't have the details of that yet, but given that we've only got one sitting before the summer recess, I would suspect that it may be the last one, but we will aim for the first one as much as we can.
Any other questions for the Vice Chair? Members are content to proceed in accordance with the suggestion made by the Vice Chair. In that case, the Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 on the 8th of July.